Okay, good morning, everyone. Nice to see all of you guys here. We're going to start with loving kindness meditation, just like we've been doing in the past. But the only difference is this time I'm not going to give you guidance on the breathing mindfulness meditation because we've been doing that a little bit now. You guys should know how to do the breathing mindfulness meditation. So we'll just do the chanting to ease into the meditation. And then that's where you're going to focus your mind on the breath. And then whenever it moves off, you just cut it off and bring it back. And then you're going to hear me come in with the loving kindness meditation after you guys have done the breathing mindfulness meditation for a period of time. Then we'll go back to the breathing mindfulness meditation and then come out with the chanting. And then that's where I'm going to start today's class, helping you guys to understand how to share the path to enlightenment, guiding children along the path. Like I mentioned, whether it's children or other people in your life, there's going to be plenty in here for you to be able to learn about how to skillfully share these teachings with others, where you're not trying to convince them or force them to do anything or not giving them unsolicited guidance, but instead skillfully helping people along the path. So if you'd like to join for meditation, I'll start with the chanting, and then you guys will be on your own for the breathing mindfulness meditation. I'll come back in with the loving kindness. Arahang Samma Sambuddho Bhagava Bhutang Bhagavanhang Apivadeyami Savakato Bhagavata Tammo Dhammang Namasami Supatipano Bhagavato Savaka Sangho Sanghang Namami Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Iti piso Bhagava Arahang Samma Sambuddho Vichacharanang Sammuno Sakato Rokavitu Anutero Purisa Dhamma Sati Satatavapmanu Sarang Bhutto Bhagavati. Continuing to breathe in through the nose and out through the nose. Repeat these affirmations in the mind on the out breath. May I be peaceful. May I be safe. May I be well. May I be free of all discontentedness and the suffering that it causes. May mom and dad be peaceful. May they be safe. May they be well. May they be free of all discontentedness and the suffering that it causes. May my family, friends, neighbors, and co-workers all be peaceful. May they be safe. May they be well. May they be free of all discontentedness and the suffering that it causes. May all those who have harmed me be peaceful. May they be safe. May they be well. May they be free of all discontentedness and the suffering that it causes. May all those who I have harmed be peaceful. May they be safe. May they be well. May they be free of all discontentedness in the suffering that it causes. May all beings, wherever they reside, be peaceful. May they be safe. May they be well. May they be free of all discontentedness in the suffering that it causes. อะระหังสัมมาสัมพุทโธภะคะวาโพตังมหาควันหังอภิวาเทมิสวากขาโตมหาควตาธัมโมธัมมังนามัสสามิสุปฏิปันโนมหาควโตสาวกสังโฆสังฆังนามามินะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะนะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะนะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะอิติปิโสมหะคะวาอะระหังสัมมาสัมพุทโธวิจาจารณังสัมมุโนสกขาโตโรกาวิตุอนุเตโรปุริสานามาสติสัตตาตาวามนุสนังพุทโธภะคะวะติ Okay, if you guys would like to slowly make your way out of meditation. Okay, what I'm going to do is just give you guys some time here to ask any and all questions that you like about meditation, because you guys have been meditating now for a few days, and perhaps you have some questions about breathing mindfulness meditation or loving kindness meditation. And I'd like to just be sure there's space in the class for you guys to ask any meditation related questions, because in order to train your mind to get to harmonious relationships, in order to train your mind to get to enlightenment, you're going to need to have a well-developed meditation practice. And that's something that's kind of like always a work in progress. So at different times, students might have questions about a meditation practice. So I'd like to just give you guys an opportunity to see if you guys have any questions about meditation. Is there anything you guys would like to ask? And remember, for those of you guys online, you can ask questions by putting that into Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom, or you can raise your hand in Zoom and ask any questions that you like.
So I found that especially in breathing mindfulness meditation, my mind keeps coming back to a specific sort of image and whatnot. And I've found that trying to like cut that off has been incredibly difficult. But being able to focus on the image, I can cut off some of the other thoughts. Is that still okay until I can build up and be able to cut off the original image?
Yeah, just keep working at it and be patient and realize that it's gradual training, gradual practice, and gradual progress. You'll have these things for a period of time, and then just one day, boom, you'll be able to cut it off. It's pretty crazy how it happens. Like you could be having all kinds of turbulent situations in your meditation, and then just one day, boom, it's just so peaceful. You can go like 4, 5, 6, even 8 weeks where things are just all shaken up. And then just one day, just out of the blue, because you've been accumulating the benefits, boom, things are just so peaceful in your meditation. And it can also go the other way. You can have 4, 5, 6, 8 weeks of peaceful meditation, and then just out of the blue, boom, one day your meditation, your mind is just all shaken up. So you just stay dedicated with it, stay consistent with it, know that you're headed in the right direction, and be patient with it.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Hello. Just wanted to ask, for this, what you're saying in the love and kindness meditation, all these words, is it written down in the book or something that I can make a photo of it? Because I cannot remember that all the steps. So I would like to write it down that I can practice with that.
The 4 phrases are in chapter 11, like, may I be peaceful, safe, well, and free of discontentedness. But the other words that I use, like the 6 specific rings, I don't have those as I do it in the book, but there's plenty of videos and podcasts and things like this. You can pull up anything where I'm doing loving kindness meditation and you'll be able to hear me doing it.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Liz? Good morning.
So there is in the piece of loving kindness where I'm thinking of those that have harmed me. What I'm inculcating, or what I'm trying to phrase, is those that I still harbor harm for or resentment for. And so it's difficult for me to visualize that person. Is it okay if I, for now, visualize things I associate with them strongly as I work towards the strength to visualize the face? Is that okay, or is that?
If I was you, I would go ahead and visualize the person, because the reason why it's hard is because there's anger and hatred or ill will or frustration or resentment or whatever else is in there. That's why it's challenging. So you won't get through that challenge by kind of going around it.
I understand.
You got to hit it straight head on. And there can be some times where anger is rising up. That's where that breathing mindfulness meditation at the end is there to kind of help you knock that down. And let me add this too, since we're talking about this, is as you're training your mind with loving kindness meditation, you're going to get to a point ultimately where you've really cultivated a lot of loving kindness in your mind over multiple months and years. And if you're noticing in your loving kindness meditation that you have loving kindness really permeating in the mind, that breathing mindfulness meditation at the end, that's optional. You don't have to do that. The reason why it's there is to help you. If you're doing loving kindness meditation, you're visualizing somebody that, wow, that hurts really bad, and you're noticing some painful feelings coming up, that's at the end there to cut that off and help you to end your meditation with a more calm mind. But you guys will get to a point where you have so much loving kindness permeating in the mind that you won't need that at the end. And if you actually are cultivating loving kindness in your mind, this is unconditioned love, right? There's no condition that's producing it. So let's just say you happen to put loving kindness at the end of your meditation. Let's just say you happen to put breathing mindfulness meditation at the end of your loving kindness meditation. You won't be able to cut off your loving kindness because there's no condition that's producing it. So you can't actually cut it off. But some people like to just leave off that breathing mindfulness meditation at the end when they're noticing that the loving kindness is really permeating in their mind. They like to just kind of end the meditation with that. So I'll just add that in there with this.
I have one more question.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes I look on YouTube for like different kinds of meditations, but I find that a lot of them they speak so much the whole way through, and there's almost over guidance, where it says like to meditate on this particular kind of a problem. And I noticed that a bit more in more Indian teachers that I've worked with before. And this seems to be somewhat not in opposition to what I'm learning here.
Yeah, this is a misunderstanding of what's causing discontentedness and what the mind needs to do in meditation. So if a teacher is guiding their students all the way through the meditation, they're not understanding that in order for an individual to get to peace and joy, their mind has to let go. And if they're getting guidance all the way through the meditation, their mind never gets an opportunity to let go. And also, a teacher in this situation isn't understanding that their students can get attached to them giving guidance. So now when they're not with their students or the students not with them, they can't meditate because they don't have the ability to hear their teacher's voice. So what you would like to be able to do is meditate the way that I'm sharing. That's what the Buddha taught, and that's what's going to lead to your enlightenment, because you're going to notice hundreds and thousands of different meditations out there, and a lot of them are taking you in the opposite direction of enlightenment. But if you can build confidence in what I'm sharing with you and what the Buddha is sharing with you, you'll see that it leads to improvement to the condition of your mind in your life. You'll get closer and closer to enlightenment because this is what it takes. But you're going to see other people doing things in other ways. I just suggest that you ignore that. And even the Buddha teaches that too. He shares that if you run across a teaching that is in conflict with what he taught, even if it's something you've learned from an actual monk or an ordained practitioner or a teacher, if it's in conflict with what he taught, he said you should ignore it and consider that that person has misunderstood his teachings. So if you understand that the mind needs to let go and that the Buddha taught to cut off thoughts, then you'll know that meditation where there's guidance all the way through, it doesn't let you do that. So this person is misunderstood, and now you can ignore that.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
I have two questions, I think. Maybe you already answered one. So when I'm doing breathing mindful meditation, I have a picture in my mind that with the breath in, it goes up the body, and then with the breath out, downwards the body and the back. Is that okay, or is this already a thought I should take away?
Yeah, this is the mind having a thought and trying to kind of almost entertain itself and hold on to something. You would like to get rid of that. Anytime your mind in breathing mindfulness meditation is holding on to anything, it hasn't let go. So you need to be able to train it to let go, coming back to the breath each time.
Okay. And the second thought I had, in the loving kindness meditation, I thought maybe it would be nice, I don't know if it's nice, to translate it to my language. So if I could also do it, adopt it. Yeah,
you can do that. If you relate better to, I think, German, right?
Yeah.
German language. Yeah, there's no harm in you translating it to that language. There's actually someone who's translating this first book into German right now. He's doing it very slowly.
Yeah.
But this is something that we're doing as well. It's already in Spanish. It's being translated to Hindi. Someone's working just a little bit on German. So if you put it into a language that you understand more, you connect with this language more, it's going to have more meaning for you, and it's going to have more impact to the mind.
I have a question about loving kindness meditation. I found that sometimes there'll be an individual that when I try to, I do the ring that includes them, and then I try to move on to the next ring. It's difficult. Should I push through and move on to the next ring, or should I do another ring with them in them?
You can do it either way. This is where it comes down to your decision making and your mindfulness of what you think your mind needs in that situation. And each time it might be a little bit different. Sometimes you might push through, sometimes you might do that ring more than once. That's a decision for you to make. And then you can see how it impacts your mind and what's working best. And understand that don't get attached to doing it one way or the other. And have the freedom to do it whatever you think is best in that specific situation. You have more? Oh, we're there? Okay. I lose track. You guys get the mics.
Sometimes, or it has been the case, that person who I've hurt and the person who has hurt me is the same person. So I can use this. Yeah. That's the same person.
So those phrases that I use, those are to apply to all of you guys. If I was you, I would use that person's name.
No,
Barbara.
I have been doing that. Yeah.
Because that's going to take care of both situations, right?
Yeah.
So these phrases, you might end up using mom and dad, that one. I use the friends, family, neighbors and coworkers, because a lot of people have those kinds of people. I use those who've hurt me, because people oftentimes are holding resentment, and they oftentimes think that the anger that they're experiencing is coming from the other person. So they're going to need to let that go. But then I also put in there, the people that you've hurt or you've harmed, because oftentimes people feel guilty and shameful about the things that they've done in the past. And that can help you to let that go and have loving kindness for those beings, realizing that, yeah, there's been some harm there, but you can let that go. And then ultimately all beings, but you can use specific names. That's what you would like to do, is use specific names, or groups of people, like I gave you the examples of, like, may all police officers, or may all politicians, or all lawyers. If you have hatred for those types of individuals, you would like to put those types of individuals in there.
Yeah, I understand all of that, but I can use the same person for both of those rings. That's what I mean. The fourth and the fifth ring, I can use the same person, because that's how I relate to it. Someone that has hurt me and someone that I've hurt, it's the same.
Well, what I'm sharing with you is, if you put the actual person's name, that's what
I've been doing. Yeah, I've been putting the person's name.
So it might be, may I be peaceful, may mom and dad be peaceful, may Rebecca be peaceful, may John be peaceful, may all beings be peaceful. Right? You don't need to put Rebecca in there twice or John in there twice. I only do those two phrases because it relates to everybody.
Oh, yeah. All right. Because you said that sometimes you'll do yourself twice, or you'll do your mum twice.
Yeah. When I first started doing this, I did myself like 2 or 3 times. I did mom 2 or 3 times, and then I did all beings, because I had a lot of negative self-talk in my own mind. I had a lot of hostility and resentment towards my mom. So I was really working on that quite a lot. So you can put people more than one time in your loving kindness meditation, but you don't have to. That's what I was making sure you understood.
All right. And there's moments where, like, the warm fuzzies will come. In that moment, circle back to the breath, circle back to the practice of loving kindness, and let go of the association of it, focusing the attention on the warm fuzzies.
Yeah, if you're noticing conditioned pleasant feelings arising during your loving kindness meditation, you can pause your loving kindness meditation, do a few moments or a few minutes of breathing mindfulness meditation to cut that off and let it go, and then go back to your loving kindness meditation.
Okay.
That would be the way to do that.
All right. Thanks.
Mm-hmm.
Let's have one more question. So in regards, sorry, 2 quick ones though. When you talk about all beings being well, I sometimes get a little bit overwhelmed with all beings. Is that all realms of all beings, like animals, spiritual realm, hell beings, all beings in all realms is what I'm, in my mind, I'm like, this is a lot of beings.
Yeah.
Like, to consider.
It means all of those beings, because you're not
Yes.
interested in excluding anyone.
Right.
You would like to get to the point where even somebody you haven't met before, they're just walking down the street and you have loving kindness towards them, meaning you would like to see them be well.
So when you speak about the different kinds of relationships we can have with the people we have not yet met, but that we extend only loving kindness to, it's with an eye to being able to be present with them, but in the future in a loving, kind way. Okay, I understand.
Yeah. Sometimes the way I do this is I'll say, may all beings who I come in contact with today be peaceful.
Okay.
Right? And then I might say, may all beings that I do not come in contact with today be peaceful. Right? So you can do these kinds of things too, because you would like every single person that you come in contact with to have loving kindness towards them. But then there's also other beings that you're not going to necessarily experience contact with them today, but maybe sometime in the future, and you would just like to have nothing but loving kindness permeating in your mind. The Buddha talks about it as enveloping your mind, every single being in the world. He calls it the all-encompassing world with loving kindness. You can't have any little, even fraction amount of anger, hatred in your mind towards any being whatsoever.
And because all of these realms coexist all the time, that's, okay, I understand. My last question is about visualizations, and maybe you'll address this when we talk about children. I'm speaking specifically about guiding young artists with visualizations before they're about to create or take the stage. I want them to have the confidence to let go of their own thoughts, but because they're 15, 16, 18, 19, there's a lot of ego there. I don't want to disengage them. So maybe you'll answer this later about how to be mindful of like their processes and recognizing that they're just so in a lot of ways infants in this journey. I don't want to push them too hard, but I don't want to give too much guidance. So
yeah, I guide children in the very same way that I do adults, other than the fact that I might like play games or activities, but it's the same exact teachings that you share with an adult versus a child or a teenager or early adulthood or something like this. It's the exact same teachings. It's the exact same sequence of how you need to start with something like the universal truth of impermanence and discontentedness and non-self, the Four Noble Truths, the Eightfold Path, the 5 precepts, so forth and so on. It's the same exact sequence. So you don't have to, modify how you might choose to do things with a different age group, other than you might make it kind of like age appropriate in terms of games and activities.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Okay, so let me see if we have any questions online. Let's see. Okay, I'm not seeing any questions online. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to switch over to our topic today, which is sharing the path to enlightenment, how to guide children along the path. I'd like to just kind of take a little bit of a poll for a second. I know Jake has children. Does anyone else here have children? I didn't think so. Is anyone else here thinking about having children someday? Is there anybody who's thinking about having children? 1, 2, kind of not sure. Okay. So that just kind of helps me to understand how to teach this. And I know the folks in Zoom, I know you guys as well. So I know there's plenty of people in YouTube and Facebook also. You guys may or may not have children, including you guys here. The way I'm going to teach you this is, I'm going to focus on children and I'm going to talk about it in that way. But just understand that you can relate this to other beings as well, because there's skillful ways to help your parents, to help your brothers and sisters and your life partners and people like this. That's not the ultimate goal of the path, is to help other people get to enlightenment, because each individual person needs to decide to get to enlightenment on their own and do that work. There's no part of the path to enlightenment where you're going out into the world and trying to convince other people to practice this path. But as it relates to children, they're in a prime time in their life where they don't really have much conditioning of their mind. They don't have that much pollution, and they actually can learn these teachings relatively quickly. So for like my son, he learned right speech in like 3 months. He learned it and started practicing it and was doing it pretty much pretty perfectly, except for the lying. He still lies every once in a while. He was practicing right speech pretty well in terms of being gentle and polite and warm and friendly and respectful, because he didn't have a lot of anger and hatred and ill will in his mind, because he didn't have all that accumulated, where an adult has a lot more challenges with that. So the reason why I teach this is because it's really helpful if we do teach children. But there's other people that can learn too. And we also have a role as parents to teach children. The Buddha talks about our role as parents is to restrain our child from evil, right? That they're headed for certain unwise decisions, and we need to be able to restrain them from that. And restraining them from that is to help them cultivate wisdom so they can make wise decisions so that they don't head in that direction. So I'm going to teach you guys a bunch of things here. This is a pretty in-depth talk, so we're going to take a break at some point as well as we're going. And just like always, feel free to ask questions, whether you're here at the temple or you're online. You can put those into Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom, or you can raise your hand in Zoom and ask any questions that you like. So the way that I think about the guiding of children is I think about that children are like a growing plant, and we are like the plant enthusiast interested in growing this plant. And then the teachings of the Buddha is like the guide stake that is guiding this plant. So if we understand the teachings of the Buddha ourselves and we've cultivated the wisdom, then we've got this guide stake in order to guide our children along this path. So this is a kind of an image to think about, that you're not forcing or controlling the plant. You're just guiding it. So it's not like you're yanking and pulling a child here and there. You're providing this guidance to allow the plant to grow, and however the plant is going to grow, but you're there to provide this guidance as a plant enthusiast, with the child being the actual growing plant. So the first thing that you need to be able to do in order to guide others on the path, whether it's children or you have other people in your life that come to you for guidance, you're going to need to cultivate wisdom first. That's why the very first priority on this path is always your own development. You wouldn't be able to teach someone else how to drive a car if you've never driven a car before. So you're going to need to cultivate wisdom yourself before you can help others on this path. So that's always the primary thing that you're working towards, is the cultivation of your wisdom. And you're doing that through learning, examining, and investigating teachings, to reflect on them, to independently verify them, and then practice them yourself. As you're practicing the teachings, you'll be able to see how they actually work to improve the condition of your mind in your life, and then you'll be in the best position to be able to share that with other people. It's helpful to understand that children are their own being. Sometimes when we have children, we think about it as, this is my son, this is my daughter. In reality, they're not mine. They don't belong to me. They don't belong to you. They are their own individual being, and they're going to be making their own individual decisions. And as a parent, the more that we think of it that way, then we tend to not put our expectations on our children. We tend to not control them. That we understand that our role in their life is to help them gain wisdom, because we are impermanent in their life. We are not permanent in their life, and we can't be there with them all the time. So the best thing we can do is help them to cultivate wisdom. So one of the ways to think about it, in addition to this plant enthusiast with a guide stake, is you can think about it like a parallel process. Like your child is going forward in life, making their own decisions, and you're kind of like right alongside of them, and you're kind of helping them and guiding them, not putting expectations on them, but guiding them to cultivate wisdom. You would always like to make wise decisions. The other day, my son, I wasn't home, and my wife had bought these rice cakes. There's like 9 big, huge rice cakes in each individual package. And there's this caramel that's dripped all over the rice cakes. And when I was gone, he ate like 4 of them or 5 of them all at one time. And that's a lot for a child to be able to eat 4 of those big rice cakes. So the next day I was at home, I was sitting on the sofa, and my son comes over with this big bag of rice cakes that he hasn't eaten all of them yet. There's still half of them in there. And I see he's got these rice cakes. Instead of just saying, no, you can't eat that, don't eat that, right? And instead of saying something like that where I'm controlling him, I said, oh, are you planning to eat some rice cakes? He said, yep, I sure am. I said, I noticed yesterday you ate quite a few of them. He said, I didn't eat that many. And I said, well, it looks like you ate 4 of them. That's quite a few. That's quite a few rice cakes. He's like, yeah, I ate 4. And then I said, how many are you planning to eat today? He said, probably around 1. And I said, okay, that sounds like a better amount. That's a wise decision. And then he sat down and ate them. And I was talking to a student online. And when it was all said and done, he ate 2. Right? No big deal, right? He ate 2. That's better than the 4. But it was his decision. I never told him what to do. I said, wow, it looks like you ate quite a few rice cakes yesterday. And he's like, yeah, not so many. You know, he's like not willing to really own up to that. But nonetheless, he made a different decision with guidance. But it was his decision. I didn't get angry that he only ate one. I didn't put an expectation on him that he has to only eat one. He made the choice for himself. So we need to be able to understand that we are impermanent in their life. They're the ones making the decisions. We need to provide them guidance. And we're like this parallel process. He's not my son. He doesn't belong to me, but he needs wisdom to understand about a certain sizable portion to be able to eat. And at the same time, we even talked about whether he has eaten dinner yet. And, is this his first aspect of eating, or has he had some fruit today? We talked about those kinds of things as well. So those are the kind of things that you would like to do, is use wise decision making to talk to your children and guide them through asking them questions and imparting wisdom. That's what's going to help them, because then when your back's turned and you're not there, they will make wise decisions. If they can only make wise decisions when you're there, that means that they haven't really cultivated the wisdom. They're only doing it because you are there. So you would like to help them to make wise choices by supporting them, encouraging them, and growing in their wise decision making. It's helpful to start early when you're guiding children. We actually started when my son was very young. One of the ways that I think about it is we started when he was in his mom's womb, because his mom was actually meditating all through her pregnancy. But even when he came out and he was an infant, there were things that we were doing to actually help him. You can do things even when they're an infant. They're not going to have the wisdom of things like the 4 foundations of mindfulness, and that they need to cut off and let go of discontentedness. But if you have that wisdom, you can actually help your children. So like our son, when he was, 6 months old, or, 9 months old, we would see him playing on the floor, and he would be playing with some toy or something like this, and something would happen. And if you guys have been around children, you know that before they start crying, they usually make a certain face. They're like, right? They kind of like do one of those things, right? So when we saw him starting to make that face, we would redirect his mind to something else. We would say, did you see those clouds outside? Right? He would like, did you see those clouds outside? We would like kind of jolt, right? And he would have to cut that off, and he would start looking outside. And sometimes we'd even get his hand and we would walk over to the window. Oh, wow, look at those clouds. Oh, did you see that squirrel? Right? And we would redirect his mind to something else, and he would cut it off and cut it off and cut it off. So even though they didn't have the wisdom, or my son didn't have the wisdom, you have the wisdom of what needs to happen in order to train their mind. So you can actually start so early like that, even when they're an infant. I started to formally train my son when he was 6 years old, and I started teaching him about impermanence, and I started teaching him about discontentedness and non-self and the Four Noble Truths, and we just did it in a playful way, which you guys are going to hear about here in a moment. But you'd like to start early, because the earlier you start, the better, so that by the time I started with him when he was 6 years old, this kid wasn't getting very discontent very frequently. And now at 12 years old, I hardly ever see him discontent at all. He's quite peaceful in his day-to-day life, because he's been training his mind all these years, throughout all these years, and he didn't have much pollution to be able to eliminate. So if you start early, this is really going to help them, and it's going to help you too, because it's going to make it easier for you as a parent to have this child who's not, whining and cranky and all this stuff. Our son never threw temper tantrums. He never did those kinds of things. He never acted out in public, where sometimes you see children that are doing that. He never actually did any of those things. He was so easy to have as a child. Then create a culture of acquiring wisdom within your family. One of the things you can do is, if you understand the path to enlightenment involves cultivation of wisdom, and what's going to lead to improvement in their life is the cultivation of wisdom, you would like to create this almost like a family culture, right? So there were times where we would be driving down the street, and I'd be taking my son to school. And at one time we had this school that was about a 45-minute drive from our house, and he would ask me questions. And sometimes I would answer those questions and I'd have the answers. Other times I didn't know the answers. And he would ask me questions, and I would say, I don't know the answer to that, but you know who does? And he's like, who? And I was like, Google. Google knows the answer to that question. And my phone would be sitting right there. And I said, why don't you Google it and see if you can find the answer? So he would just sit there. All right, I'm going to Google this and figure it out. So he was learning how to Google things. He was learning how to search online. He was learning how to use a mobile phone. He was cultivating wisdom. He was learning about that particular thing that he was interested in. So you would like to create this culture of cultivation of wisdom within your family. You're not going to know all the answers to all your children's questions, but there's a way for them to get those answers. So if you create that within your family, then they'll know that essentially what their goal in this life is to constantly be cultivating wisdom. And you can aid them in that by guiding them towards that. And now I notice my son does these kinds of things on his own, where he'll have a question and he'll just kind of be researching it on his own and kind of figuring it out, where I helped him to learn how to do that, but now he does it on his own, cultivation of wisdom. So you can create that as kind of like almost like a family culture. Remember that you're a role model in your children's life. However you treat people, they're going to look to you and conform to how you do things. So this is how your gamma works. That if you are bitter and harsh and hostile and resentful towards your children, if you're yelling and hollering at them, if you're impatient with them, as you get older and they get older, they're going to treat you the same way. That's your gamma. That whatever you put out, that's what's going to come back to you. But conversely, if you're being loving and kind and warm and gentle and patient and these kinds of things, your children are going to learn that from you because you're a role model. They're watching you and they're learning from you every moment. And that's what you're going to experience coming back from you, from your children. So you'll teach your children through your words and your verbal interaction, but you'll teach them much more through your bodily actions and the way that you function. They're learning from you every moment. They're watching you. Even when my child was an infant and a toddler, he couldn't even speak yet. I noticed he was watching me and he was learning how I interact in the world, and he's picked that up throughout his life. So remember, you're teaching your child every single moment. The way that you function, your children are going to pick that up along the way. So you would like to always keep that in mind, that your children are learning from you every moment. Even when my son was inside his mom's womb, I knew that he was learning at that time. So my wife and I, we didn't argue during that time, or if I felt angry, I would walk away, because even though they're inside the womb, they can hear through the skin. Sometimes we think that they're inside the womb and they can't hear. My son knew my voice as soon as he came out from the womb. I used to play him mandolin when he was inside the womb. I used to play this instrument, and there were times where he recognized the mandolin when he came out, because when he was inside the womb, I would play it for him. And then when he came outside, he recognized it as I was playing it. Sometimes he'd even ask me to play it before he could even speak. He would kind of like crawl over to my instrument case. He would open it up and he would hand me my mandolin because he wanted me to be able to play the mandolin. So they can hear and they're absorbing things even when they're inside the womb. So keep that in mind. And along those lines, it's helpful if you're respectful towards your life partner, your parents, your grandparents, your siblings, and your elders, because your children are learning that from you. If you're disrespectful to your parents, they are going to be disrespectful to you. So even if you have differences with your parents and you disagree with the things that they're doing, it's unwise for you to gossip and slander anybody at all, including your parents, and especially in front of your children, because you're teaching your children how to interact with you. If you're taking really good care of your parents, they're going to learn that from you. So if you're going to visit grandma and grandpa, if you're taking them gifts, if you're being loving and kind with them, your children are learning that from you. And now that's how they're going to treat you, because they're learning how you treat your parents through you, and that's the role model that they're getting. So if you can be respectful towards all these individuals, this is going to help your children to learn moral conduct and how to treat others and being polite, kind, friendly, and respectful. You're going to need to get comfortable with the struggle and allowing it to occur. I gave you guys that example yesterday with my son and the children in the village, how we had to let him struggle through that. And even though we could see where things were headed, he didn't he wasn't interested in making decisions the way that we were guiding him towards. So you're going to need to allow your children to struggle. Because of your attachment to your child, you might feel like you need to rush in there and fix everything for them. In reality, you're going to need to allow them to struggle sometimes. So even sometimes my son comes home from school and sometimes he tells me about certain things that are happening at school. Unless it's really significant, I won't even say anything to the school. I won't say anything to the teachers. I won't say anything to the principal, because I know this is something that he's fully capable of handling, and I would like to provide him the opportunity to handle it. And he just handles it, and he just deals with it appropriately. Whereas if every single time they have the minute little issue, you rush in there to fix it, they never get an opportunity to problem solve. They never get an opportunity to cultivate their own wisdom. So you're going to need to learn how to step back and in some cases let them handle these things and allow the struggle to occur. You don't need to feel guilty about that, because this is the best thing you could do, is help your child cultivate wisdom. And sometimes going through the struggle allows them to be able to do that. It's going to be helpful if you allow your child to eliminate their attachment to you. They're going to have an attachment to you, and you're going to be attached to your child, particularly early on. And you're going to need to learn how to eliminate your attachment. And you're going to need to learn how to help them eliminate their attachment. One of the things you can do is, as they're aging, is you can have them stay at other people's houses, whether it's grandparents or friends or family members, so that they learn that you're not always going to be around them. So if they sleep over at other people's houses, this is really helpful for you and for them to train your mind to let go. Even like, if you have a child in the living room and you're off in the bedroom somewhere, and of course everything's, somewhat safe in the environment that they're in, you can be away from them where they're not always used to you being there every single second. So this will be helpful so that your children don't cling to you and they can learn how to spend time with other people, and that you are not permanent in their life. You're going to need to be patient, because as you're teaching children, you're going to have to repeat things more than one time. There's going to be multiple times. I can't even tell you how many times me and my son have talked about lying. I lost count. It's well over 100. We've talked about lying many, 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 many times. And even still, about once every 3 months, once every 6 months, I catch him in some kind of silly lie, right? Because they have some kind of craving in their mind. They want something. And if they tell the truth, they're not going to get it. So they lie in order to get what they want, right? So you're going to experience this where you're going to need to talk to your children more than one time about things, multiple times. Think about you when you're learning meditation or the Four Noble Truths or some of these other teachings. You have to learn them more than one time. So your children are definitely going to need to do that too. But when you're teaching them, what you would like to teach them is the why behind it, right? So we don't just say, stop lying. You got to stop lying. Lying is wrong. We talk about why lying is so unwise, about how you'll be seen as unreliable and undependable, and you're not going to be trustworthy. People are going to not trust you in life. So now when you have projects at work, your boss isn't going to be willing to give that to you, or your friends or family members aren't going to be able to trust you. So we talk about these kinds of things. So you're going to need to have patience and understand that just like you, it's gradual training, gradual practice, and gradual progress. As you're teaching children, it's helpful to have games and activities, being creative to create fun and activities. When I was teaching my son about impermanence, I spent about a minute or two in the house talking to him about impermanence. And then I said, hey, let's go outside on a scavenger hunt and let's walk around the village and see if we can find something that is permanent. So he was like, yeah, all right, Dad, let's go. Let's go on a scavenger hunt. So we went outside in the village and we walked around, and of course he couldn't find anything that was permanent. So then we switched it. And I said, now let's look for things that are impermanent. So he walks down the street. He's like, wow, there's a crack in the sidewalk. That's impermanence. Yeah, right, Bailan. Oh, look at that fence. The paint on the fence is fading. That is impermanence. Yeah, you're right. Oh, look at the trees. The trees have leaves that are green, and then on the ground, there's brown leaves. That's impermanence. They fell out of the tree and now they've turned brown. They've changed. So this is like really fun things. So I used to create all kinds of games and fun things like this. And sometimes they worked really well and sometimes they didn't, but nonetheless, we were having fun. It's important not to force your children to learn these teachings, but instead be welcoming and inviting. That I never forced my son to meditate. If you try to pressure people into doing things, they're not going to be interested in doing it. So sometimes I would say, hey, Bailan, would you like to learn about the Four Noble Truths? Or are you interested to understand meditation? Or would you like to understand about right speech so you and mom can start learning how to talk with each other better, right? And sometimes he would say yes. And sometimes he's like, no, I'm not interested. Okay, no worries, right? Just don't teach him at that particular moment. So you're not interested in forcing your child. You're never going to force anyone to get to enlightenment. Because think about you. When somebody tries to force you to do something, what's the first thing you do? Yeah, you stop, right? You dig in your heels and you push back. So if you do that to other people, that's what they're going to do too. So whether it's your children, whether it's your parents, your siblings, or other people, if you try to force this stuff on them, the first thing they're going to do is push back and they're going to dig their heels in. So don't even try to force people. You just ask people. And then if they're interested in learning, great. And if they're not, then if you don't have a craving, you'll be fine in that situation because they say, no, I'm not interested in learning. Okay, great. Right? You don't have a craving, you're not going to have any painful feelings. But if you have a craving to teach people, when they say no, they're not interested, you'll be having painful feelings. So you got to get rid of your craving in that situation. It's helpful to start small and then build from there. When I first decided I was going to teach my son formally, he was 6 years old, and I realized I needed to teach him these teachings. And I realized that I hadn't really formally taught him anything at all up to that point in time. It was just daddy, playtime, fun stuff. I wasn't really formally teaching him much at all at that point or anything. I wasn't sure if he would even really follow my advice and my guidance. So the way that I started is I started really small. I was sitting in front of the TV on the sofa and he was sitting on the floor and the remote control was sitting next to him. And I said to him, I said, Bailan, can you hand me the remote control? Because even up to that point, I hadn't even done anything like that with him. And he was like, sure, Daddy, here you go. And he handed me the remote control. And I was like, this kid will do what I ask. That's pretty cool. So then like about 10 or 15 minutes later, he got up and went into the kitchen to get himself a glass of water. And I wasn't even thirsty, but I said, Bailan, can you get Daddy a glass of water too? And he said, sure, Daddy, I'll get you a glass of water. And he got me a glass of water and he brought me a glass of water. And I was like, this kid will follow me. He will listen to what I have to say. And then he will do something that I'm asking him to do. So that was the basis of how we got started. I started teaching him the teachings of the Buddha just by figuring out whether this kid would even listen to me or not, because I hadn't even done anything like that up to that point. So you're going to need to start small and then gradually build from there. And whether you do it the way that I did it or some other way, it's up to you. But that's how I started. I started really small and I built from there. You're going to need to get comfortable with mistakes because you're going to make mistakes along the way. I made plenty of mistakes. I would try certain things and I thought in my mind before I spent time with my son, I was like, oh, this is going to be so perfect to teach him this particular thing. And I would try it and it didn't work at all. And I would just laugh at myself and I would giggle and I would just throw it away or modify it or change it in some way and make it better. So you're going to make mistakes. So there's going to be this trial and error, and that's the fun in it. You're going to learn from those mistakes, because one of the things you need to learn is you need to learn, how does your child think? How does your child learn? What's the best way to actually talk with them and guide them? And that's going to be trial and error. As you're learning their mind and how they think, they're not going to think the same way as you. They're going to have their own way of thinking about things, and you're going to need to learn how they think. And this is going to happen through trial and error. So you're going to need to get comfortable with mistakes. There's kind of two different ways of training an individual, whether it's a child or anybody else. There's proactive training, and then there's real-time training. Proactive training was like him and I talking about the universal truth of impermanence, going out and doing scavenger hunts and different things like this. This is proactive training, like kind of helping him in advance know about some of the teachings. But then there's like this real time training when there's daily struggles, and you're going to need to have loving kindness, compassion, and patience when you're doing this. Here's an example of real time training. I actually induced this one. I knew that he was attached to his Legos, and he was putting together a lot of Legos when he was earlier in life. So he would put his Legos together, and then he would go to school. And I would be at home, and I would break up his Legos into like 3, 4, 5, 6 pieces, and I would lay them on the living room floor so that when he would walk in from school, he would see his Legos on the floor. And I'd already taught him the 3 universal truths and the 4 noble truths and things like this. So when he walked in and he saw the Legos on the floor, right away he started crying, right? Because he experienced this impermanence and he was craving for these Legos to be permanent. So he started crying as soon as he saw the Legos on the floor. And now, because he had the proactive training, now it was time to do real time training. I got down on the floor with him and I was like, "What's going on, Bailan?" He's like, "My Legos." He's like all beat up about it. He's all upset. His mind's discontent because he's experiencing this impermanence and he had a craving. So now I was like, "Well, what is it that's going on here? Like, what's happened here?" He's like, "I don't know what's happened. It's just I came home and everything's broken up and this isn't the way I left it and da 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 da." And I was like, "Do you remember the other day when we were talking about impermanence? Do you think that this could be some impermanence that you're experiencing?" "Yeah, probably, but my Legos, he's just really upset, right?" And now we started talking about craving, and I was like, "Well, what is it that causes your mind to be discontent? Is it because the Legos are broken, or is it your craving for them to be together?" Right? And then he started to understand. So then I said, well, just like they're together and that's not permanent, being apart is not permanent either. You can actually put them back together. And then he's like, "You're right, I can." And he started putting them back together, and then he was able to put them back together. So then I waited about 3, 4, 5 days, and then I did it again. I broke up his Legos. He came home and he started crying just a little bit, maybe like 15 seconds, 30 seconds, and then he cut it off and let it go, and he put them back together. And then I waited like another 3, 4, 5, 6 days, and then I broke them up again, and he came home and he looked at the Legos, and he looked at me, and he looked at the Legos, and he looked at me, and he said, "You broke up my Legos, didn't you?" I was like, "Yep, I sure did." He's like, "All right, I'm just going to put them back together." I was like, "Sweet, good idea." No crying, no nothing, right? So if you're attached to your child, you're going to have a hard time doing something like this. But if you understand the problem is their craving and you can induce this to be able to help them get rid of it, now when his Legos fall apart, he's not upset about it, right? He's completely perfectly fine. So I knew he had to go through that painful situation. It's like walking through the fire in order to appreciate the fresh air on the other side. And you can induce these kinds of things because you're around your children a lot. You're going to know that they need help in this kind of way, and you're going to know what are their cravings, and you're going to be able to induce these kinds of things. So there's real time training that you can do, but you're going to need to do this with loving kindness. You're going to need to do it with compassion. You're going to need to do it with patience. I wasn't doing it out of ill will. Right? I wasn't trying to make him angry, and I can't make him angry anyway. It's his own mind, his own craving. But I was doing this out of loving kindness, this genuine interest in seeing him be well, this compassion, this concern for his misfortune, that he hadn't learned these teachings yet. And now I was being patient to be able to walk him through, to be able to learn this and be able to get to the point where he doesn't experience discontentedness any longer. So there's this proactive training, and then there's this real-time training that you can do. Be prepared for detours. When you're teaching your children, there's going to be time where there's detours. Like, say you have 3 children and you guys are all putting on your clothes and you're getting ready to go out the door and you're all headed for some event. Maybe it's going to school or a birthday party or some other thing. And everybody's all excited about where they're headed and everybody's getting going. But now let's just say some of the kids start squabbling with each other and they start being bitter and harsh and hostile. You're going to need to be willing to take a pause and a timeout and now have a little discussion. Maybe it's 3 minutes, maybe it's 5 minutes. But if you have a craving to hurry up and get to where you're going because you don't want to be late, you're not going to be willing to take that pause. You need to understand the goal isn't to get to this event. That's not the goal. The goal is to make sure that we're cultivating wisdom and that we're doing it peacefully so that when we arrive to this event, that our minds are all peaceful and joyful. So if your goal is to hurry up and get to the event, you're going to throw up a big storm. There's going to be like a big, tornado on the way to get to this particular event because we're just trying to get there on time and we have this craving to get there on time. But if you get rid of that and you understand that your goal is to help these beings cultivate wisdom and that when we arrive, whenever that is, that we do so peacefully and joyfully. That means you might have to call a timeout sometimes and make a little detour. There was a situation one time where we were on our way to play mini golf. And I was really interested in playing miniature golf. And him and I used to go regularly, about once a week, to go play miniature golf. And then after we had done this 2 or 3 times, we were on our way to go play miniature golf one time. And he started having all this ego. He was talking about how he was going to beat me and he was going to crush me and he was going to do this, that, and the other thing. And I was like, wow, that sounds like a bunch of ego. No, it's not ego. It's just the truth. I'm going to crush you. And I was like, oh, okay. Well, you know what? I don't think I'm interested in playing mini golf today, even though I was really interested. I was like, you know what? I think I'm not interested in playing mini golf with someone who has so much ego. So you know what? Why don't we go somewhere else? And we started like heading towards the mall. And then he was like, I wanted to go play mini golf. Like, come on, I'm going to beat you. I was like, oh, that's the case. Well, you know what? We're not even going to go to the mall. We're just going to go back home. I'm not interested in being outside with someone with so much ego and so much hostility. Let's just go home. So if you're not attached and you understand what you're trying to do is trying to help your child see that, hey, when you have ego and you have arrogance, people aren't going to be interested in playing with you. That's what I was teaching him in the car. I was like, whether it's me or whether it's your friends or whether it's other people, when you start having ego like this with a game, people aren't going to be interested in playing with you. And this was a lesson that he learned through that. So the very next time, like a week or 2 later, when we went to go play mini golf, he didn't have ego. I even asked him, I said, so would you like to go play mini golf? And he was like, yeah. I was like, are you going to beat me? You're going to crush me? You're going to walk all over me? He's like, no, we're just going to go play and have fun. And I was like, oh, okay, that sounds good. I'd like to go do that, right? So he was able to modify his conduct through training his mind, and he had this experience. So you're going to need to have these detours. And if you're not attached to getting to the mini golf, then you'll be willing to do these kinds of things. You'll need to be supportive and encouraging at all times because they're going to be struggling. There's going to be certain situations where they're really struggling. There was one time where my son, I knew he was attached to Sprite, the drink. It's like a soda, right? So one time I showed up at his school with a Sprite and I think it was Burger King because he was eating Burger King back then and it was a plant-based burger and fries or something like this. And I had it waiting in the car for him. And then when he got in the car, he had this particular Sprite and he popped it open and I knew he was attached to it. So I asked him, I said, can I have a sip? And he hands it to me. And I went to put it to my lips and I hadn't even had it on my lips yet. And he's like, gosh, why are you drinking so much? And I was like, Bailan, I haven't even drank any yet. I was like, I'm not even have it on my lips yet. He was like, man, you're drinking so much. You said you were going to take a sip. You didn't say you were going to drink that much. And I was like, oh, okay. You're definitely attached to your Sprite. In that case, I'm going to give this one to mommy. You can drink your water. We have some water right there. You can drink the water. And he got so angry and so frustrated. But all the way through, I was being supportive. I was just quiet for a period of time. We were actually on our way to football practice, and we sat in the parking lot, and he was eating his meal and he was getting frustrated. Even he said some profanity, which was the first time I ever heard him. He actually cussed at me and called me some names because he was so angry that I took this Sprite, and he was so attached to it. But the whole time I was just smiling, and I was just like, wow, thank goodness I did this. Because can you imagine that maybe he had this craving all through his life, and now maybe he's at his life partner's house, his father-in-law maybe asked for a sip of his Sprite, and then he gets angry and bitter and harsh with his father-in-law. Now he damages that relationship. So he was able to do that with me in this supporting and encouraging environment where I wasn't being bitter and harsh and hostile to him. And I knew that this was part of the process that he was going to need to be able to experience in order to be able to get rid of this crave and desire attachment. You're going to need to eliminate your anger and aggressiveness. So like in this situation, I wasn't angry with him. I wasn't frustrated with him. When he started cussing at me and he was turning all red and he was getting so angry, he was actually, as he was talking, he was actually spitting. I wasn't angry. I just understood like, wow, look at this mind, and thank goodness I did this. So when you're doing these kinds of things with your children, you're guiding them, you're going to need to be supportive and encouraging and make sure that you don't have anger yourself. At any point that you ever have anger in any of these situations, you're going to need to step away, get rid of that anger, and then at some point, a couple of days, a couple of hours later, then start guiding them again in that situation. It's important to understand the difference between firm speech and harsh speech. You'll see in the teachings of the Buddha that he teaches you to eliminate harsh speech and never to speak harshly. But you'll also see in his teachings where he sometimes talks to his students firmly. I don't do this with my students. The only person I've ever done it with was my son and my wife. But the Buddha, oftentimes his students would come live with him almost like he was their father. So in these situations with a child, you might need to firm up your speech in some situations in order to be able to help them understand how serious you are. But when you're doing this, there's never anger behind it. There's never hostility behind it. It's just firming up your speech a little bit, and it's not harsh. So for example, for the first 3, 4, 5, 6 times that we talked about lying, it was like, Bailan, you're lying. Like, this is not wise. You're going to need to address this lying. You're going to have lots of difficulties in your life. Like, we're like talking about lying in this way. But then by like the 4th, 5th, 6th time, it was like, Bailan, you're lying again. You need to stop this. Lying is not going to work for you. This is going to cause you problems in your life, right? So I'm kind of like firming up my speech. It's not harsh. It's not aggressive. It's not hostile or bitter. It's just firmed up a little bit, right? So you're going to be able to do that, but just be sure that you don't have the anger behind it and then there's not harshness behind it. But you can change your tone and your tempo in order to help them understand the seriousness of the thing that you're teaching them. You're looking to impart wisdom, like I've been sharing, that you're not looking to control them. You have a vested interest in your child being very wise. Because more likely than not, as you age, this is going to be the individual who's going to make decisions about your life, right? When you're 60, 70, 80, if you live to 90 or older, these are the people that are going to be making decisions about your life. So all through their childhood and their adulthood, you would like to be helping this individual cultivate wisdom so that they can make wise decisions about your life. As you guys heard the other day, my grandmother is 101 years old. She's going to be 102 this year. You know, it's basically like having a child again. She's living with my sister, and my sister is taking care of her. She's not really making too many decisions on her own about her food or where she goes and all these different kind of things. My sister is making all those kinds of decisions. But all through our life, my grandmother treated us very lovingly, very respectfully, very kind, very warm, and very gentle. And this is the way my sister seems like she's treating my grandmother, right? So you would like to impart wisdom with your child because you have a vested interest in this person being very wise, because they're the ones that are going to be making decisions about your life as you get older. You can have little mini lessons and also repeat tasks. What I mean by mini lessons is there were times where we'd be driving down the street and I would just give him a 30-second teaching here or there, or 1 or 2 minutes here or there. Like you guys are sitting here for multiple hours listening to me talk. An adult can do that, but a child can't do that. So I needed to do these little mini lessons. Sometimes we would just be walking somewhere in the mall. Sometimes we would just be driving in the car, little 30 seconds here, 1 minute there, 2 minutes there. And I needed to repeat these things more than one time. So for example, like that Sprite that I talked about that he got really angry and frustrated about. By the time we got home, he was calm. And I asked him, I said, Bailan, I think we need to talk about this. Can you come talk with me? And he's like, sure, Dad, what would you like to talk about? And we talked about it. And I discussed with him, I was like, Dad has bought you many Sprites and Dad will buy you many more Sprites. If for some reason I drank all your Sprite, even though I didn't, but some reason I did, what could we do about that? How could we handle that? And he's like, well, we could stop and get another one. I was like, exactly. See, we could just buy another one. No big deal. Right. So we kind of talked about this and how sharing was important and these kinds of things. And then he said, Dad, you're probably not going to buy me any more Sprites. Right. And I was like, well, we'll see. Right. And then the very next day, I needed to pick him up from school. I bought him a Sprite again because I was interested in him taking the wisdom from the night before and applying it in that situation. Whereas if it was like another 3 months before he got a Sprite, he would have forgotten the lessons that he learned that very next day or that day before. So when I went to pick him up the very next day, I bought him another Sprite. It was waiting for him. He opened the door. He looked at the Sprite. He looked at me. He looked at the Sprite. He looked at me. And then he got in the truck and he popped open his Sprite. And I said, can Dad have a sip? And he said, sure, here you go, Dad. And I said, how much can I drink? He said, as much as you like. And I was like, oh, okay, great. And I just took a little sip and handed it back to him, right? So he was able to put the teachings into practice. So you're going to need to repeat tasks more than one time. You can use the Eightfold Path as your guide because this is the perfect plan for you. It's also the perfect plan for your children. So at one time, my son and his mom were having a lot of difficulties in their relationship. They were talking harsh and aggressive and bitter with each other. This is because of their attachment that they had in their relationship. So I needed to teach my son about right speech. And I taught him to speak eliminating lies, slander, harsh speech, frivolous speech. I taught him to speak at the proper time. What you say is true, gentle, beneficial, with a mind of loving kindness, the 5 factors of well-spoken speech. And I was helping him to be able to understand the Eightfold Path, each individual factor. I even taught him about, right effort, right mindfulness, right concentration. I taught him all those different things about how to be aware of his thoughts and ideas, how to cut things off and let them go. There was even a point in time where one time I was driving my wife's truck and he was in the passenger seat and I needed to pull over to the side of the road and then I needed to cross the road and go inside to the store to get something. And it was only going to take like 3 minutes and then I was going to come back. And when I was in the truck, I said, okay, would you like to come with me? And he said, no, I'm going to stay here. And I said, okay, great. I said, if you stay here, just understand that you might have the craving to come up when I go and I leave, and you might have a craving to cross the road, because at this point he was like 7 years old, 8 years old. I said, you might have a craving to cross the road and come find me, but you're going to need to cut that off and let it go because it's not wise for you to cross the road by yourself at this age. So I'm going to go do this thing and you stay here. Okay. He was like, yeah, that's what I'm going to do. I was like, all right, perfect. So then I went and I left and I was in the store a little bit longer than I thought. And then when I came back, he was like, Dad, you were right. I had the craving to come see you, but I cut it off and it went away. So you can teach them the Eightfold Path, not only like in a formal way, but you can teach it in the moment like that when they're actually going to be using it so they can learn it and use it right away. This is going to help them to be able to see it and see its effectiveness and actually use it. It's helpful to teach your children life skills because we're going to have many things to teach our children as they grow, not just about the path to enlightenment, but the things that are going to help them are things like learning how to do cooking and cleaning and laundry and ironing and shopping and gardening and exercising, conversating, reading, learning, developing their memory, making wise decisions, how to make decisions to have friends and things like this. There's many things that you're going to need to be able to teach them. And these life skills are very important for them. I remember at 9 years old, my mom was teaching me how to iron shirts and iron clothes because she knew that she wasn't always going to be there to iron clothes for me. So I needed to learn that as a 9-year-old child, right? So you can teach your children these kinds of things and they'll really enjoy it because they're learning how to function in the world independently of mom and dad. And then also this helps your household to be more self-sustaining because as parents, early on, you're going to be doing everything for your children. Early on, it's diapers, food, bathing, all this kind of stuff, right? It's just nonstop, that kind of stuff. But as they start getting to like 4, 5, 6, things start to kind of transition a little bit. They start becoming a little bit more independent. And this is a time where from that age, you can actually start teaching them how to do things on their own. But you're going to need to have patience because they're not going to do it 100% properly the first time. But as you're teaching them, it's like an investment. You're investing in your future to be more and more independent so that they can do these things on their own and they're not reliant on you to do these kinds of things. So you can teach them these kinds of things. I saw my niece here in Thailand at the age of 2.5 washing dishes. She was up on a stool and her mom was sitting there teaching her how to wash dishes at the age of 2.5. So you can literally teach children things, very early in life. If you wait until they're 12 to teach them how to wash dishes, they've gone all that time without really learning how to do things like this. You can be teaching them all the way through how to do laundry, how to do these things, that they're part of the household and they're contributing to these things. And then it'll just be a normal part of life. Whereas if it's kind of like the magic number is 12, and that's when the laundry gets turned on and the dishes get turned on, by this time they've been complacent and somewhat lazy for 12 years. And now all of a sudden you're going to start teaching them how to do things around the house. They're not going to be able to make that shift very easily. So you would like to have them be part of the household really early on, right? So probably at the age of 7 or 8, my son was helping us put dishes away. And then he did that for several months. And then we started teaching him how to wash dishes and do laundry and all these kinds of things. So you would like to embed that into what you're doing with your children. It's important not to punish. Sometimes that's the way we're taught, is to punish our children. We think that that's the way to actually raise them, particularly if that's the way we were raised, if we were punished. But when you're punishing them, they're not actually learning anything. We're just punishing them for the sake of punishing them. What you would like to do is guide your children, speak to them, talk to them, discuss things with them, explain consequences and decisions to them. But then ultimately it does help in some situations to get their attention, to be able to do things where, like, if they're maybe not doing their homework regularly and you're noticing that they're watching a lot of TV, you've talked to them about this 2 or 3 times and they're not making any modified decisions. And now maybe on the 3rd time, you say, okay, we've talked about this 3 times now. Is there anything that you don't understand about the need to do your homework? Nope, Dad, you've talked to me about everything. I completely understand it. Okay, so I just would like to let you know, if now in the future you're not doing your homework, I'm going to need to do something in order to get your attention here. I think you're going to need to give up your TV and not watch TV Monday through Friday. How does that work for you? And he's like, okay, yeah, I agree. If I don't do my homework from this point forward, I'm not going to watch TV Monday through Friday. Okay, so that's our agreement. If you're not turning in your homework, then you're not going to be watching TV from Monday through Friday. Yep, definitely. So now I'm not punishing him. What I'm doing is I'm getting his attention, and he's made the decision and he realizes that this is important for him. So it's not like out of anger. I'm like, okay, you didn't turn in your homework and you're not getting any TV and you're being punished. No, this is a very negative way to interact with your child. You would like to show them these consequences and show them wise decision making that, hey, if you're not able to get your homework done Monday through Friday, then maybe we need to get something out of your life to give you more space to do your homework. So this is a way that you can guide them, is not punishing them, but instead talking to them about consequences, and where possible, allow them to develop the plan for the consequences that they agree to ahead of time, so that then when they do that thing again, they already know what the consequences are. And they're the ones who came up with the consequences. There's times where me and my wife were talking to my son, and we were like, hey, if this happens again, we think that this needs to happen. And he's like, oh no, 10 days without video games, that's way too much. And we're like, okay, well, what do you think it should be? He's like, 1 day. And we're like, oh, no, lying. You're going to really need to sit back and think about why you are lying, and you're going to need some time to really process this. 1 day is not enough. Can you think of something higher than 1 day? And he's like, all right, how about 3 days? Not quite sure about that, right? So then we would kind of talk to him, and eventually maybe he would come up with 5 days, right? And this works out really good in our household because my wife usually goes really high. She starts with a really high number, and then my son will start really low. It's kind of like a negotiation here in Thailand. Like Thai people negotiate prices sometimes. That's kind of like the way it happens. But at the end of it, my son is the one who's made the decision of what he thinks it should be, and we've kind of guided him along there, right? So you would like them to be able to come up with the consequences and that they agree to it, but it's not a punishment. They're not being punished. You're doing this to be able to help them to be more attentive to the wise decision making that you're guiding them towards. But before you even get to this part, you would like to go through 2, 3, 4 different conversations where you're just trying to guide them through wisdom. So by the time you get to something like this, they understand that they've had all this opportunity to improve their conduct before you ever got to doing something like this. And now they can see, like, mom and dad are being reasonable. They're trying to talk with me. They're trying to guide me. They're imparting wisdom. It's not just punish. That's not what you're interested in. It's helpful to reward good conduct, because if you're rewarding good conduct, you won't actually have to do some of these other things that I'm talking about. What I mean by this is like accentuating the positive. Rather than pointing out to your children all the things that they're doing wrong, so to speak, instead, when they're doing things that are wise and that are wise decisions, point that out to them. Let them know that they're making wise decisions, right? So when I talked to my son about the rice cakes and he said, hey, I'm only going to eat one, I was like, hey, that's a wise decision, right? Or sometimes I see him, he'll come home and he'll say, Dad, I'm going to do my homework before I start playing video games. Hey, son, that's a wise decision. That's wonderful. Hey, good idea. Right? So you would like to accentuate the positive. And by accentuating the positive, you're not actually going to have to really address the negative things very much, because they're always going to be doing these positive things. Your children are looking for your attention. They want your attention, and they're going to get it either through doing positive things or doing negative things. So if you're constantly pointing out the negative things and that's how they get your attention, they're going to keep doing those negative things in order to get your attention. But if you point out the positive things, 99% of the time, you're talking about the wise things that they're doing, they're going to tend to repeat those things over and over and over again. So if you accentuate the positive and you reward good conduct, you're going to see more and more improvement in the way that they make decisions. Make sure you understand that you're not going to know the full story. When things are happening with your children and you're away from them, don't assume that you know the full story, especially when they go to school and different things are happening, particularly early on when they're, 6, 8, 9, 10, you're not going to know the full story. It's going to take them time to develop the ability to explain to you what's going on. If you hear something from your child and you just assume you know the full story and you rush in there to the school and start making a bunch of decisions, you're uninformed. You would like to really gather information. When your children start telling you certain things about what's going on, listen to them, ask them questions, and just understand that that's the information that you're getting from them. Now, maybe you talk to a teacher and you ask the teacher a bunch of questions, and now you're getting the information from the teacher. Or maybe it's a friend that they've been over their house and you've got to talk to their friend, or you've got to talk to the friend's parents. You're not going to be able to make decisions just solely on what your children are telling you. And if you're doing that, you're just assuming that you know the full story. So you're going to need to be able to not cling to your perceptions. What a perception is your views and opinions about the world. If you cling to your perceptions or you make assumptions, you're going to be making decisions that aren't actually fully informed, and now you're making unwise decisions. I'll give you a simple example. Let's just say you give your child a task and you say, hey, I need you to clean your room. And they say, okay, Dad, I'll clean my room. All right, perfect. I'm going downstairs to get lunch started. You clean your room and I'll be back in a little bit. Right? So now you're off making lunch, and now you haven't heard from them for a while, and now you go upstairs to check in on them to see how their room's going. And when you walk in their room, it's a mess. There's books and Legos and everything all over the room. When you walked in like that, if you just start yelling and hollering at them, first of all, it's not right speech. You're having a certain craving. That's unwise. But you don't know the full story, right? So what you would like to do is you'd like to ask, hey, what's going on here? I thought you were going to clean your room, right? Instead of just assuming that they didn't clean their room, ask them a question. Hey, what's going on here? I thought you were going to clean your room. Oh, Dad, I did clean my room. Right before you walked in, I bumped into the bookshelf and those books just flew all over the floor and the Legos just broke all over the floor. Oh, I see. So what's your plan now? Oh, I'm going to put the books away and clean up the Legos. Perfect. I'll see you downstairs. Lunch is ready. Right? Done. Right? Instead of like just assuming that when you open their door and you see their room is a mess, don't assume that they haven't cleaned their room, because you don't know that. Right? You weren't there. So you're going to need to ask questions and be sure you don't cling to your perceptions. And this is going to be the case in these kinds of situations, but also when they're dealing with friends or classmates or teachers, you're not going to know the full story. So you're going to need to get really good at asking questions. When you're talking to your children, the location and position that you're in and they're in is very important. If you have a ability for your child to sit on the floor and you to sit like on a sofa or a chair, they're going to be much more attentive to what it is that you have to say. So when me and my son talk about something really serious, he will typically sit on the floor and I will sit on the sofa. And we started this very early. When he was like 6 years old, we started doing this. If there was something really important that I needed to share with him, I would have him come over and sit on the floor. And there's times where we talk and he's sitting on the sofa and I'm sitting on the sofa, or we're sitting at a table, eating dinner or what have you. But when it's something really serious and really important, he knows now to come sit on the floor. I'll even say to him, Bailan, we have something really serious to talk about. I need you to come talk with Dad. And he'll come over and he'll sit on the floor, because he got used to this when he was 6 years old. And this is where he's in a position to more absorb what it is I have to share with him. I'm not more important than him. I'm not above him. But this positioning helps his mind to absorb what it is that he's actually learning. So you might decide to use something like this. It's very simple, but it works really, really well, that he's more attentive when he's sitting in that position, because he's looking up at me and I'm looking straight into his eyes. And now it's like a waterfall of information and wisdom being able to flow into him. So you might think about this kind of thing when you're sharing things with children. So I'm going to pause here. We've got some more, but I'm going to pause here and see what questions you guys have. Do you guys have any questions that you would like to ask on anything that I've been sharing? Looks like Jake has questions.
So many, but I'll start with this one. So moving back to firmness of speech. So sometimes I use this with my children, and I'm starting to realize, because of past interactions of anger and hostility, they now treat the firmness of voice with fear.
Mm-hmm.
How do I use it but not have them be fearful?
So you would like to go a really long time without using it at all, a good 3 to 6 months, not using firm speech at all.
Okay.
And then that way it kind of clears out their mind and undoes that conditioning. Then when you start using it again, use it sporadically, only after you've had multiple discussions about it in other situations. And when you are using firm speech, it's important that you don't have any anger behind it. You should notice that your mind is just as calm with your firm speech as it is with your other speech. And this firm speech, if you took away the firmness, it should be just fine. So the word choice is the same. The only thing that's changed is the tone and the tempo. So for example, I might say, Bailan, this lying is not good. You really need to improve this lying, right? Like this is just like gentle and jovial, right? But then I can also say, Bailan, this lying is not good. You really need to improve this. So it's the same word choice. I've just firmed it up a little bit. So that way you'll know that there's no anger and hostility behind it, and you can see your mind is very calm. In fact, at this point, it's actually effort for me to have to firm up my speech because I don't even actually like talk to people that way anymore. Where if it comes out of you like so easy to firm up your speech, then you know that there could be potentially some anger and hostility behind it. So you would like it to be almost that you have to put effort into it to be firm with them, but it's the same word choice. It's just a different tone and tempo, and do it sporadically so that it is more effective. If you were like that every single day with your children, it's not effective. So at this point, I think I very rarely do this now. It's maybe like once every 6 months that we're talking like this, once every 3 months. But there for a while, it was maybe like once a month that I needed to be firm with him. And that was about the height of it, once a month that I was doing that with him. Whereas if I did it every day or even every week, it would lose its effectiveness.
Okay. And then I have a problem where my son it would be like the hoarding of food. He won't even have his food yet, and he'll see somebody else's food, and he will say like, if they don't finish it, can I eat their food? Like, how do I address this? I have been trying to very gently say like, well, eat your food first and then see if you're hungry.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's what you'll need to do. You'll say, hey, there's plenty of food for everyone. Nobody's going to walk away hungry. You eat your food, and when we're done, we'll see. And you can easily eat some more food. Don't worry, son. There's plenty of food for everybody, right? So this is something that you're just going to have to reassure him that there's plenty of food for everybody. Maybe in a previous life, or maybe he was in an animal existence, maybe he had difficulties getting food, or maybe there was some situation in your family where that's the case. So you just would like to reassure him. And it's probably going to take multiple times in order for him to hear this and for him to see this. And then what you would like to do is each time after a meal, say, I don't know your son's name, I'm sorry. You can say, hey, John, or whatever his name is, are you hungry? And he's like, nope, I'm not hungry, Dad. Okay, so you can see here, you've eaten and you've gotten your fill for food, right? That's what you're saying? He's like, yeah, I'm full. Okay, great. So you can see you don't need to hoard food, son. This is something you're going to walk away from each meal being full. So you're going to have to show him at the end of the meal that he's full. And you're going to need to do this multiple times so he undoes that conditioning. Okay, I don't see any other questions anywhere. So let's keep on going. I have some more to share with. Or actually, you know what? Let's take a break. It's almost 11. Let's take a little break. So let's take a break until 11:15. That'll give you over 20-minute break. And then we'll pick this back up and continue on learning about how to guide children on the path. Okay, so take a nice 20-minute break. Thank you for your questions and your interest to learn. I'll see you guys after break. Okay, I'm going to keep going here. We only have a little bit more to talk about with this topic. So we're talking about how to guide children along the path, and any investment that you make in helping to guide your children, it's just going to pay off for you later, right? It's going to be a little bit more investment up front, but it's just going to get better and better for you as they're becoming more and more wise to make wise decisions. So just a few more things to talk about. Sometimes in different cultures, we're taught to be our child's friend, like they are our best friend or we are their best friend. What I would encourage you to think about is that you're not their friend. You can be friendly to your children, but you're not their friend. You are their parent, right? If you think about yourself as a friend and they think of you as a friend, there's a whole different dynamic there than parent to child. And I would encourage you to maintain that role as a parent where you can be friendly to your children, but you don't think of yourself as a friend, because friends do things very differently than parents. Parents are going to be interacting with individuals and their children very differently than a friend. So if you give up that parent role and all of a sudden you're trying to be their best friend, or you think of them as your best friend, this is, in my opinion, problematic. You would like to maintain that role as a parent. Ensure your child understands what true love is. We talked about this yesterday, that unconditional love. One of the best ways for them to understand and learn what unconditional love is for you to be practicing it. That there was a period of time where my son told me that he didn't think his mom loved him. I said, really? Your mom doesn't love you? Why do you say that? He's like, I don't know. And I was like, well, what does it mean when somebody loves you? Right? I didn't just tell him, like, of course your mom loves you. Like, I know that, but he didn't know that. Right? So I was like, what does it mean when somebody loves you? How do we know when somebody loves us? What kind of things would we experience if somebody loves us? I asked him these kinds of questions, and he would rattle off all these different things. And basically he was describing his mom. And I was like, wow, you just described exactly what your mom does. So do you think your mom loves you? He's like, yeah, I guess she does, right? So rather than just tell him, I guided him to understanding what true love is. So you would like your children to understand what true love is, because they might think the love is, if you buy me ice cream and chocolate every day, you love me, right? That's not love, right? So you're going to need to help them to understand what is love, and they'll gain most of that through the way you practice love, but then you're going to also have to have discussions about it too. You can communicate love through your actions, not just through your words, but through your actions, right? Sometimes we get very much in the habit of just telling people that we love them, but you would like to put your actions behind this so that they can experience it through your actions. And you don't have to tell them every time that you're doing something that this is because I love you, but just make sure your actions are speaking love. They'll be able to experience the communication of love through your actions, not only your speech. If you have multiple children, it's important to treat them all equally. Like we were talking about with equanimity, that you would like to treat all of them equally. Like if you get one of them ice cream, you would like to get all of them an ice cream. If one of them get a particular thing, you'd like to give all of them a particular thing. When I was growing up as a child, when we would go see my grandmother, if it was my birthday, my sister would get a gift on my birthday too. I thought this was really interesting. And then when my sister's birthday, she would get a gift, I would get a gift too. And this always made it feel like I wasn't being left out, or my sister wasn't being left out. And this was really nice. But then of course, sometimes it's nice for your children to understand that, yeah, one of your children are getting a gift because it's their birthday and the other ones are not. This is part of learning and growing too, that they don't crave permanence. But in certain situations, you would like to be sure everyone's being treated equally. As I was growing up, that wasn't the case. My sister got a lot of stuff, and she was the oldest. I didn't really get those kinds of things. I had to get all these things for myself. And I had a certain amount of resentment to a certain degree that my sister was getting all of these things and I wasn't getting those kinds of things. So it's helpful if you treat all your children equally. Just like we talked yesterday, quality of time is more important than the quantity of time. When you spend time with your children, be sure you're spending quality time with them. If you have shared custody, there might be people online that are having shared custody, or as you guys have children, you might end up choosing to end a relationship with the biological parents, and you might actually have this shared custody. If you're treating your children and you're guiding them along this path, but your ex-partner is not, when they go away and they're spending time with mom or dad and they come back, they're not going to be right where you left off. So if you've been teaching them all these teachings and then they go away for a week or two or even a weekend with mom or dad, and in that household, they're not learning and practicing these teachings, when they come back with you, they're not going to be right where they left off. And you're going to need to be patient with that. So when there's shared custody involved, they're going to be influenced by being away from you, and they're not actually learning and practicing the teachings in that environment. So you're going to need to be patient with those kinds of things. They can also be influenced by people at school. There were times when my son would go to school and he would come home with all this ego from his school. And I would ask him, like, what is going on at that school? Like, man, every time you come home, you've got all this ego. You're puffed up with ego. And I would have to let him know, like, just because your friends have all this ego doesn't mean you need to inherit that ego and you need to function that way too. So understand that your children can be easily influenced by other people. So you're going to need to be observant of this. You're going to need to teach your children how to enjoy things versus having excitement. Sometimes when parents come home, they get so excited to see their children, and their children get so excited to see the parents. It's like this big celebration when mommy and daddy are home. Yay, mommy's home. Let's go run and jump and hug and kiss, and mommy, way, mommy's home. And they're so excited. But then when mommy's away on a business trip for 2 weeks, they're very lonely. They're very bored. They're very frustrated because their mind goes up into this excitement. And then when that's not there, their mind's going to drop down into this other part. So you would like to be able to teach your children how to enjoy time with you without those conditioned pleasant feelings. So when you come home, it doesn't have to be this big celebration. And that probably makes you feel good because you get those conditioned pleasant feelings, but you're trying to get rid of that kind of thing too. And you're not interested in guiding your children to have that kind of experience. So it's helpful to do this with children. It's even helpful if any of you guys have animals, if you've ever noticed this, like when you come home, an animal can get so excited, but then when you're gone, they're so lonely and they're so bored. So you would like to make it as just normal that we're going to be coming and going and no big deal. There's times when my wife goes to the USA to work for 2 or 3 months, and me and my son are home by ourselves for this period of time. He never misses his mom. Of course, we enjoy when we're spending time with mom, but we also enjoy when she's away too. We have fun doing the things that we do. We're not having enjoyment because she's away. We just enjoy spending time alone and doing the things that we tend to do. And when she comes home, even after 2 or 3 months of being gone, it's not this big, huge celebration. It's just like, all right, mom's back now, right? No big deal. So you would like to learn how to enjoy things versus getting these conditioned pleasant feelings. Then there's praise and reward. This is the last thing. Your children's mind, including your mind, functions very much like an animal in the unenlightened state. You're a human being. You're not an animal. But just like an animal functions through praise and reward, that if you praise and reward an animal, it will tend to repeat those things over and over. Your children are the same way, that if you praise and reward them for good conduct and wise decisions, they will tend to do those things multiple times because they've been reinforced that those are wise decisions. So you can actually praise and reward your children, and you can not only do this with things like snacks and toys and things of this nature, but you can also think about your hugs and your kisses and, little rub on the head and things like this as a little bit of a praise and reward. So you can reward those wise decisions that they're making and incentivize that, and you'll see that they'll tend to do those things repeatedly over and over and over again. Okay, so this is everything that I have to share on this topic. I didn't realize there were just 2 more slides, or I would have just did those 2 slides and we could have taken a break. But this is everything that I have to share on this topic. If you guys would like, we can do the same thing like we did on Tuesday, where I can share the next topic that we were planning to teach this afternoon, and then we can actually be done at lunchtime. Would you guys like to do that again? Like we did on Tuesday, where instead of like taking a lunch, coming back, doing meditation and teaching a topic, that I can just teach it here in about 30 or 45 minutes. Then we can take lunch at 12:15 and just be done for the whole day. You guys good for that? Okay, why don't we do it that way? Okay, so this topic that I have to share with you is developing and maintaining relationships, choosing wholesome friends, and a life partner. This is something you guys are going to need to be able to get really good at, because who you choose to involve in your life as a friend or as a life partner is going to dictate the experiences that you have. For example, if you chose to have a life partner who's lying, who's cheating, who's taking substances that cause heedlessness and things like this, your life's going to be impacted by that. It's your decision that's leading to that result. Other people can't create karma for you, but your decision to be associated with these individuals is what's creating your karma. So you're going to need to get good at choosing wholesome friends. And if you're going to have a life partner, but you need to be able to do this in a way that doesn't have judgment, where you're judging the other person with conceit. So I'm going to teach you guys some things to keep in mind as you're making decisions about friends and a life partner. So this first part is all about friends and a life partner. It can be combined. And then towards the end, I'm going to give you some guidance just on terms of selecting a life partner. So just like all of these discussions, it starts with acquiring wisdom. Wisdom. That's what's going to lead to any improved results in your life. And because whenever I'm doing these talks, I never know who might be in these talks, because like online, people are coming and going all the time, and even here at the center. So I start out with each one of these saying, you need to develop wisdom. That's what's going to help you to make wise decisions, is your own wisdom. But then you're going to need to understand the natural law of karma, of it's your life, your decisions, and your results. Any decisions that you make about who to involve in your life, it's going to impact you. The choices and decisions you make are going to impact you. So you need to learn the natural law of karma really deeply. And all the teachings of the Buddha are helping you to understand that natural law of karma, of cause and effect, or action and result in one way or another. In all the foundational programs, I teach you the natural law of karma in detail. There's not as much of it in this course in terms of going in and actually talking about the natural law itself, but everything I'm teaching you in one way or another is coming back to this natural law of karma. So what you choose in your life and who you choose to involve in your life, it matters. There's a discourse that the Buddha gives. It's called "The Snake Has Passed Through Feces." What he talks about here is he talks about how this snake might not bite you, but it'll smear you with feces. Feces is poop, right? So if you think about this in relationship to your friends, this is a really good analogy to keep in mind. So let me give you an example first, and then we'll talk about the snake who passes through feces. Let's just say that as I was growing up as a child, I had all these childhood friends from the age of like 8, 10, 12, all these childhood friends. And as we've aged, we got to 16, 18 years old, say some of my friends started to sell drugs. They never actually tried to sell them to me because they know that I don't use those things, but I've always known that they sell drugs, and they know that I know that they sell drugs. But I just hang out with them because they've been a childhood friend for so long, right? Well, now we're walking down the street, we're in a car, we're driving down the street, they've got drugs on them. I get pulled over in my car for speeding, and now they slip these drugs underneath of my seat. And now the police officer, for one reason or another, starts searching the car, and they find the drugs under my seat. Well, who's going to jail, me or the friend? I'm going to jail, right? This is what the Buddha is saying, is that this snake might not bite you, but it'll smear you with feces. Or say we're walking down the street and some rival drug dealer sees my friend and they start shooting with a gun. Those bullets don't have names on it. My clinging to this friend and me holding on to this friend when they're practicing a livelihood that is unwise is producing results for me, that I'm going to jail or I'm getting shot with a gun and maybe murdered because of my unwise decision to associate with someone who's doing unwholesome things for their livelihood. So the choices that you make about who to involve in your life, it matters, and you're going to experience results because of that. So you can keep this analogy in mind that the snake is passing through feces and it might smear you, but it's not going to necessarily bite you. Your friend isn't necessarily going to bite you. My friend in this example isn't trying to sell me drugs, but in this situation, I'm going to jail or I'm getting shot with bullets. You can use the 5 precepts as a guide for you in terms of choosing friends and in choosing a life partner. The Buddha teaches these 5 precepts, and I teach them at different times, where he talks about killing, stealing, sexual misconduct, lying, and intoxicants. And we go into detail in talking about these things and why it's important to understand these teachings and practice them. Well, if you know that by you practicing the 5 precepts, it's going to help you have wholesome karma, and if you weren't practicing the 5 precepts, it's going to produce unwholesome karma for you. Well, the same is true about anybody you choose to involve in your life. If you choose to involve somebody in your life who is not practicing the 5 precepts and you're choosing to associate with them, you're going to be impacted by that. So if I had a life partner who was using drugs and alcohol, and they're spending their money in drugs and alcohol, and they're making all these unwise decisions because of the drugs and alcohol, I'm going to be impacted by that, because now we have to pay for lawyers. I have to bail them out of jail. Maybe they're wrecking our car every once in a while. We have to repair that. Maybe they're arguing with the neighbors. I'm experiencing the results of my decisions of choosing to associate with this individual who is now in my life, and it's taking substances that cause heedlessness. So you would like to learn those 5 precepts for yourself really closely so that you practice them and you're not making unwise decisions about any of those things. But then also you can use that as a basis to be able to help you determine whether or not it'd be wise for you to include somebody else in your life or not. Those individuals might not know the 5 precepts in the way that you know them, or think about them in the way that you think about them. But these 5 precepts show up in many different teachings. Jesus Christ, Prophet Muhammad, other people like this, they don't teach them as clear, in my opinion, as the Buddha, and they don't teach them in the same way as the Buddha, so you can see this cause and effect. But nonetheless, these are things that even grandma and grandpa, mom and dad teach us when we're growing up. So you would like to be sure that anybody you involve in your life, that at a minimum they're practicing the 5 precepts, because otherwise their decisions to not practice those are going to impact you. And again, they might not know them as the 5 precepts, but you can look at it like a lens, that you're looking through this lens of the 5 precepts to determine who to involve in your life. And you're not judging them, and you're not looking down on them if they're choosing not to practice the 5 precepts. You're just using this like as a baseline decision making. The Buddha bases everything that he teaches you on discernment or wise decision making. So you can make the wise decision that it's unwise for me to associate with someone who's maybe using drugs or alcohol, but at the same time not look down on this person for their choice to do so. Because we probably did those same things at one time ourselves. So we don't need to look down on them with arrogance and pride and ego, conceit. We don't need to do that. But we can just understand through wise decision making that this individual who I'm choosing to be my life partner, if they're choosing to use drugs and alcohol, it's going to impact us in unwholesome ways. And I'm just not interested in that. And that can be a wise decision, discernment, rather than basing it through conceit. So you can use the 5 precepts as a way to help you and guide you to make wise decisions about who to involve in your life. Wholesome friends that you're looking to cultivate equal wise friends. People who have wisdom, they're going to be doing wholesome things, and you might consider them to be wise friends. So you're looking for people who are making wise decisions. And again, their decisions aren't necessarily going to match your decisions, right? But you can look at their decisions and see if they're wise or not. Because if they're constantly making unwise decisions over and over and over and over again, and you choose to involve them in your life, their unwise decisions are going to affect you. So you're looking for people who are making wise decisions. It's helpful if you find friends and a life partner who understand and practice non-clinging and non-attachment. When you have people who are clinging and attached to you, this is a recipe for disaster, because when people start getting attached to you, you're going to experience difficulties in those relationships because they're getting attached to you. Maybe you're getting attached to them. Your minds are holding on. You guys are getting discontent with each other. Remember, you can use discontentedness as an indication to you that there's attachment in a relationship. So where you see that there's craving, desire, attachment in your relationships, you would like to clear that out as best as possible so that you aren't experiencing the discontentedness in your relationships. As you notice that other people are starting to cling to you, because as you become more and more awake, more and more enlightened, people really gravitate towards that, and people might really grab on to that. There's things that you can do early on in your relationships to be sure that people aren't getting attached to you. So I gave you some examples the other day when we were talking, some of you guys were asking questions. I was sharing how early on in a relationship, when somebody's calling you or sending you text messages, you can intentionally not answer it and introduce some impermanence into the situation. Wait several hours or even a few days before you call them back or send them a reply in your text message, so that their mind doesn't get a chance to grab on to you, because that's usually what people are doing early in a relationship. They're trying to grab on to you and they're trying to get those pleasant feelings, but you're disinterested in that, because any kind of attachment is going to lead to discontentedness, and it's going to sabotage your ability to have successful relationships. So early on in the relationship, you would like to introduce some impermanence into the situation. Even do things where, like, maybe you guys have agreed you're going to go to the park together next Friday, and then maybe on Wednesday something comes up and you're like, hey, sorry, Robert, I can't go to the park on Friday. Maybe we can do this another time, but I'm going to need to change this. I really apologize. I'm really sorry, right? And you can do these kinds of things where you're introducing some impermanence so that their mind doesn't grab on. Whereas if every time they call you, you're right there. Every time they get a missed call, you call them right back. You're just inviting, craving, and clinging into the relationship, and it's going to end, and you're going to end up experiencing discontentedness. They're going to push you away. It's going to be difficult for you guys to have a healthy relationship. Having friends and definitely a life partner who understands true love is going to make things so much easier for you, so much better for you, because while you're learning about unconditional love, they can be learning about that too and practicing it. So sometimes having a partner even watch one of the talks that I've given on true love is really helpful. As you're first starting to get to know each other, you can even ask them, what is love? What does love mean to you? How do you know if somebody's loving you? Well, if they're like, well, if they let me borrow their money and they wash my dishes and they clean my clothes, then I know they love me. That's all conditional things. Those things are all going to be gone someday. When I first met my wife, I would come home and she would have like 5-6 entrees waiting for me because she wasn't working, and she could cook and she could spend all this time cooking. She used to do the laundry. She used to, clean the house and all these other things. But then as things changed in our relationship, as she started working, as we had children, as we moved to Thailand, she doesn't do any of those things for me anymore, right? So if that is what you think love is, or if that's what you think your partner thinks love is, when all that stuff starts changing, they'll think the love is gone. So if you're going to spend time getting to know a partner and really investing in the relationship, you would like to be sure that they understand what true love is, so that when you're practicing true love, they know it and they can identify it, because that way you guys will get along much better and you'll have much more success. Every relationship to be successful needs politeness, kindness, friendliness, and respect. If you expect these things to happen in a relationship and you want these things, when they're not happening, you'll be upset, right? So you need to be able to understand that the only person who can be polite, kind, friendly, and respectful in every situation is an enlightened being. And if you can only be friends with enlightened beings, you're going to have very few friends right now, because you probably don't even know how to determine if someone's enlightened or not, right? So understand that you need politeness, kindness, friendliness, and respect in order to form a healthy relationship. But also understand that some of your friends and even your life partner, they're not going to be able to do that in every situation. So you're going to have to look at each situation and decide whether it makes sense for you to continue in this relationship. If you're meeting someone for the first time and they're already disrespectful, they're already impolite, probably not a good idea to go down that path. But if you've been friends with someone for 6 months or 3 months or a year, and there's some incident where they've been impolite or disrespectful, okay, no harm, no foul. They're not enlightened. They're struggling. You can overlook those things. If you don't have craving for them to be a certain way, you can maintain your contentedness. But you would like to see a track record of you and them being polite, kind, friendly, and respectful. Some teachings from the Buddha about harmonious relationships. He talks about every harmonious relationship essentially needs these 4 things, or these 5 things. He says that in a relationship, there needs to be giving or generosity, that this is going to promote a harmonious relationship where you're being generous with the people around you. And they're maybe choosing to practice generosity too, but you would like to be practicing generosity in your relationships. He talks about endearing speech, right? If you're practicing the 5 factors of well-spoken speech, you're going to be practicing that pretty well. But endearing speech is like lovingly speaking, right? So like when my wife, sometimes she'll send me a message and she'll say, Dada, can you pick up Bailan from school today? I'll say, sure, dear, anything for you. Right? It's kind of endearing speech instead of just like, okay, right? Or, okay, I'll do it, right? I'll just kind of add a little bit of endearing speech. Sure, dear, anything for you, right? I'll just kind of add a little bit of that in there. So you would like to be able to have this endearing speech with the people around you, warm and gentle and loving and kind. He also talks about each relationship needs beneficent conduct or good, wholesome moral conduct. If you're being bitter and harsh and hostile and resentful, if you're using wrong speech, wrong action in your relationships, it's not going to go well. So in order for a relationship to be successful, the Buddha teaches that there needs to be a certain level of moral conduct or beneficent conduct. And then he talks about equality, that every relationship needs equality. This is where you can see that the Buddha never taught that women are below men or anything like that. Some people try to attribute that to the Buddha. The Buddha never taught that whatsoever. He taught everybody's equal. Men, women, even he taught 2,500 years ago. He didn't teach to degrade women or minorities or anything like this. He taught that everybody's equal. So if you're in a relationship thinking that you're above your life partner or that you're below your life partner or you're above your friends or below your friends, it's not going to promote a healthy and harmonious relationship. So in your mind, you need to see everybody as being equal. I do this even with my son. When we're sitting down talking as a family, if my son has an idea, I will treat his idea just as valid as his mom's, right? And he's an equal in this family, right? So you need to be able to think that way. Even if other people don't think that way, if you think that way, it'll promote harmony in your relationships. So generosity, endearing speech, moral conduct or beneficent conduct, and equality are the 4 criteria that the Buddha says you need in a relationship in order for it to be successful. And then I suggest that you eliminate confrontation, where you discuss things and you can disagree with politeness, kindness, friendliness, and respect, rather than craving permanent agreement. You know, I thought that when me and my wife first got together, that we had to agree on everything. And if there was something that she disagreed with me about, it was like a fight to death to try to convince her to agree with me. But that's not the way your relationships are going to go. You're going to have disagreements sometimes, and you can sit down and discuss those. And at the end of the conversation, you might actually still disagree, and that's okay. That just means you guys have different opinions and different views. You don't have to come to an agreement. But sometimes after you guys share your thoughts, the other person might have changed their mind. But in those kinds of discussions, you would like to be sure that your goal isn't to try to convince them to change their mind. Because if you're trying to convince them to change your mind, you're doing that out of craving, desire, attachment. But if you're just sharing your views and opinions, and if this person chooses to change their mind, then that's a choice for them to make. So you can just share your views and opinions, and then maybe even you change your mind by the end of the conversation. Who knows? So you would like to eliminate this confrontation where you have to be at odds with each other. You have to fight each other, and you have to be right and they have to be wrong, or somebody has to win or somebody has to lose. Just like we talked about with guiding children, it's important with your friends and your life partner that you don't assume that you know the full story. Any kinds of situations that are arising, ask questions, gain information, gain insight before you start making any decisions. If you start making decisions on a half-baked story, you're going to be making unwise decisions. You would like to have full wisdom. There are situations that happened with my family and my friends that I've taken a week or 2 to be able to gather all the information before I actually start making any kinds of decisions. The last thing you're interested in doing is making decisions without full information. You need to fully understand what's going on in your own mind, and you need to understand what's going on in the world before you can start making decisions. Otherwise, you're going to waver in your decisions. You would like to be able to make confident decisions and walk forward with those decisions. So it's going to take time for you to do that. So you're going to need to be patient and not assume that you can know the full story. Ask lots of questions. In terms of selecting a friend or a life partner, it'll be helpful if you have someone who's a problem solver, because as a friend or as a life partner, you guys are going to face problems. You're going to slowly start to think of them less and less as problems and more as challenges. There's going to be certain challenges that you guys have as a friend or as a life partner, as a couple. And as you face these challenges, you would like to get really good at being problem solvers. Me and my wife, from very early in our relationship, before we were even married, we had all kinds of problems that were coming at us, and we needed to solve these challenges. We needed to solve these. We learned very early in our relationship how to be good problem solvers and be able to talk through the challenges that we were facing and then solve those challenges. So that's what you're really looking for in a relationship, because it's not going to be a perfect relationship. You guys are going to have challenges, but if you can sit down and talk about them and you can solve them together, that's what's going to really help you guys. It's important to take your time when you're making friends or you're selecting a life partner. Sometimes the mind is chasing a pleasant feeling, and you might feel like, I have 3 friends now, but I'll be so much happier if I have 10. And you're just in a hurry to have 10 friends. Or you might be in a hurry to have a life partner. And in these situations, you're not going to make a wise decision because you're just trying to get to that pleasant feeling. And if you hurry up and make a decision, it can oftentimes be an unwise decision. So you're going to need to be willing to take your time and spend time with multiple people before you make any kind of final decisions, because there's no rush to spend the rest of your life with somebody. Sometimes that's what we're doing. We're trying to rush to hurry up and find a life partner. Well, if you guys are going to spend the rest of your life together, why do you have to be in a rush to find that person? You're going to be together for the rest of your life. Take your time, right? Make sure you're making a wise decision. The way that you see your friends and potential future life partner treat other people is going to be an indication of how they're going to treat you. So when you see them treating other people in certain ways, that's an indication to you of how they're going to treat you. So when you go out with friends or you go out with a life partner, if they're being angry and bitter and disrespectful to taxi drivers, to food servers, to maybe the housekeeper at the hotel, to the front desk of the hotel, they're being bitter and harsh and hostile, this is an indication of how they're going to treat you. Eventually, they're going to look at you in the same way, and they're going to treat you that same way. At the beginning of a relationship, oftentimes it's the honeymoon phase, and we're not really paying attention to all these things because we're just so having such pleasant feelings to be involved with this new person that we overlook these kinds of things. But you would like to pay attention to these kinds of things and look at how they treat other people, because they're going to treat you that way at some point. Same thing as it goes for if you get with a person who's potentially a life partner, if they're constantly talking about their ex-boyfriends or their ex-girlfriends in negative and degrading ways, or they're talking about their parents and their siblings in negative and degrading ways, what they're telling you is they have difficulties having relationships, and you're going to be that next person. You're going to be the ex-boyfriend or the ex-girlfriend pretty soon, right? So if they're constantly telling you about how everybody else is wrong, they're doing this wrong, they're doing this wrong, their parents, their siblings, their coworkers, their ex-boyfriends, their ex-girlfriends, and they're just trashing all these people, they're basically telling you that they don't know how to get along with other people, and you're going to be that next person. But when you have that little glimmer in your eye and you're at the beginning of a relationship, you think like, not me, it couldn't be me, but yeah, you're going to be that next person at some point. So how they treat others and how they speak about others is how they're going to treat you and how they're going to speak about you at some point. It's important to understand that your choices in friends and a life partner doesn't need to please other people. It's your life, your decisions, and your results. If I would have listened to my family about who to spend time with and who to have a life partner, I wouldn't have been with anybody. My family hated pretty much anybody that I spent time with. And if that was the case, if I came home and they hated people and I was like, I guess I can't be with this person because I'm trying to please mom or I'm trying to please sister, then I wouldn't have picked the people that I was interested in spending time with. So remember that your choice in a partner has nothing to do with your parents, has nothing to do with your siblings, has nothing to do with any of those people. You have to make the decision that's right for you. And other people might disagree with you about the decisions that you're making, but they don't understand your mind 100%, and they don't understand this person that you're spending time with 100%. There were times that I would come home with somebody and we'd spend like 30 minutes or an hour there, and we would leave. And then like 3 days later, someone in my family is calling me about how I needed to break up with this person because they were so wrong for me. Well, they only spent 30 minutes or an hour with this person. How could they know that this person is so wrong for me? This is their expectations and their cravings. So don't allow your expectation or craving to try to please mom or dad about your life partner to guide your decision making. You need to decide for yourself who you would like to be with in terms of friends and a potential life partner. You're not trying to please other people through your decision. Mom and dad, they've made their choice of who they would like to be with. Brothers and sisters, they've made their choice of who they would like to be with. And you get to make your choice about who you would like to be with. So your decisions aren't to be able to please others. As you're having relationships, you're going to need to leave space for growth because these people are going to change. Me and my wife have been together almost 18 years now. We're completely different people than when we first met. When we first met, I was in business. I had lots of money, lots of wealth, lots of employees. We were living in the USA. We were living life a certain way. She was unemployed. She had 2 suitcases. She didn't really have much understanding of the language of English. We were completely different people back then. Over the 18 years that we've been together, we've completely changed. I don't have that money anymore. We don't have the things that we used to have before. So if you understand that these people are going to change, then this will help you to not cling and crave and want them to be the same way. Because sometimes we meet somebody early in life, and then if I wanted my wife to be exactly the same person she was 18 years ago, that's unrealistic. Because of the universal truth of impermanence, she's been evolving. She's been changing. Her interests have been changing. And so have mine. So when I started moving away from the business world to start teaching Buddhist teachings, if my wife was clinging to that money, she would have had a hard time when I was moving into sharing the teachings of the Buddha, because I don't give her money anymore. Where before I paid for everything. All of her money was fun money, where now she has to make all that herself. Anything she would like to do, she's got to make her own money. So if she was clinging to that money and that person who she married way back when things started changing, she would have really struggled during that period of time. So you're going to need to leave space for growth, because people are going to change in your life. They're not going to be the same person when you met them. So leaving that space for growth will be really helpful for you. Any questions on the topic of friends and a life partner? Looks like Jake has a question.
Let's see. First question I have is on problem solving. So often I have encountered this. I'm a problem solver. Is what I do for most of my work, most of my life. That's what I've done, is solve various tech problems and that. So my instinct is to try to help people solve their problems when they're talking to me. But how do I become more aware of when somebody isn't looking to have their problem solved? You know what I mean?
You ask them when they start telling you about all their problems. You say, are you looking for answers from me, or are you interested in advice from me? Is this something you would like my help with? You ask them that before you just go in an unsolicited way, because that's where your ego's coming in, maybe your judgment's coming in, and they may not be interested in that, and they might just be interested in you listening to them. So that's where asking questions is really helpful, because then you know for sure. Because sometimes they're going to say, yeah, that's the whole reason why I'm sharing this with you. Or sometimes they're like, no, I just needed somebody to talk to about this. Okay, great. And you just don't say anything, because like I mentioned, you guys are going to have so much wisdom as you're getting closer and closer to enlightenment. If you told everybody everything you know about the wisdom of the world, you're going to be in these 3-year conversations with this person. And then this person might not even be interested in what it is that you have to say. And now you're wasting your time, your very valuable time. So be sure that if you're going to share wisdom with someone, that it's somebody who's actually interested in knowing what you have to say.
I've lost my second question, but if I come to it, I will.
Okay, just let me know. All right. All right, I don't see any questions online either. So I'm going to move on to now talking exclusively about life partners. These are specific for selecting a life partner. And I think you guys may be in that category, that you might be interested at some point to have a life partner. So this can be really helpful for you. The first thing is to understand that the perfect life partner does not exist. They only exist within your own mind. Sometimes we have this image in our mind of exactly the perfect person, like Princess Charming or Prince Charming. This person doesn't exist. They only exist within your own mind. And the more that you come to terms with that, the better. Whoever you meet, who's ultimately going to be your life partner, they are an imperfect person, just like you. They are imperfect. Sometimes when we meet a partner, we cast all of our dreams and aspirations on this person, and we think that this person is going to make me feel complete. This person is going to make me feel whole. This person is going to give me what I want in the world. This is just attachment. So if you just set up in your mind that the perfect person does not exist, this person is not going to make you feel whole. They are not going to make you feel complete. They are a struggling individual in the world, just like you. The only person who's not struggling is an enlightened being. By the time somebody gets to enlightenment, they're no longer struggling in the world. But an enlightened being, if they're going to have a partner, they will already have a partner. An enlightened being isn't going to get to enlightenment and then be like, I'm missing something in my life. I think I'm going to get married, right? They don't do that. Either you're going to get married or have a partner prior to enlightenment, or you're going to end up being single and you're going to get to enlightenment through that. You're not going to get to enlightenment and then choose to go have a partner. That's not the way any of this works. You would have already made those decisions on your way to enlightenment. So because any partner that you might choose to come in contact with and have as a potential partner, they're not enlightened. I can assure you that, right? And now you can know that they are an imperfect person, just like you, right? So understand that the perfect person doesn't exist. You're looking for someone who's willing to develop important skills, realizing that they are an imperfect person and that they're going to need to develop, that they are a work in progress. If you are with a life partner or a potential life partner who thinks that they're absolutely perfect and they can do no wrong, you're in for a lot of trouble, because in their mind, anything that happens that is going not well, it's your fault. Because in their mind, they're perfect and everybody else is the problem. So you would like to be sure that whoever you're going to pick as a life partner, that they're willing to develop important skills and that they realize that they are an imperfect person and they have inner growth and inner work to do. Just like you, they have that inner work to do too. And that they're responsible for their own inner work and you're responsible for your inner work. So in developing important skills as an individual and as a couple is really important. Understand that official marriage isn't required in order to have a lifelong sustaining relationship with each other. Sometimes we feel like marriage is the end all be all. Well, when you're getting married, aside from the cultural ceremony perhaps, or spending time with friends and letting people know that you're committed to this person, essentially what you're doing is you're going to a government office and you're filling out a contract and informing the government of who you're going to spend the rest of your life with. I don't need to inform the government of who I'm going to spend the rest of my life with. It's just not needed, right? In some situations, it might be helpful for you to do that. Like places like the USA, there's tax advantages, or there's certain privileges associated with like visiting in the hospital and things like this, where it makes sense to perhaps do those kinds of things. But it's not like that everywhere. Here in Thailand, only about 20% of the people are officially married. The other 80% of the people, they all consider them to be married, but they're not legally married. At one point, me and my wife were legally married, but then we actually went down to the government office and we signed the papers to get a legal divorce. but we're still together, right? Because now when we were married, I felt like I was complacent and I felt like I had this pressure on me in this relationship. But when we signed the paper, it was like a big burden got lifted from my shoulders. And now I know that we're together because we're choosing to be together, not because we have this contract with the government that is hard to get out of, but we're choosing to be together because we truly love each other. So if you would like to get officially married, go for it. But just understand that you don't have to. Sometimes people have this craving for this big, beautiful ceremony and all the friends to come. You can still do a ceremony in without the legal part of it if you'd like to. But don't feel like that's the end all be all, because you're not going to get married and have this big, wonderful, beautiful ceremony and then live happily and actually required. So on that note, there's no such thing as living happily ever after. Right? This is what we read in the fairy tales. So as a child, we read all these stories about living happily ever after, and we think that that's what it actually is, that we meet, we fall in love, and then we live happily ever after. That's not the way it works. What's actually happening is instead you meet each other, you learn each other, you work on developing skills and ability to solve challenges with each other, you learn to communicate, you learn to have discussions, you learn to be friends, you learn to not want anything from each other, you learn to be interested in seeing your partner be well and succeed. You support, encourage, and motivate each other to accomplish whatever they'd like to accomplish without putting any expectations or controlling conduct into the relationship. And then if you do all that stuff, you will live happily ever after, right? This is what a real relationship actually is. So there's real work to do. It's not meet, fall in love, and live happily ever after. There's real work in a relationship, and that work is happening within your own mind. So this is really what's happening in an actual relationship. And if you do all these things, you will live happily ever after. As you're doing the dating process, we call it dating. Here in Thailand, they call it learning each other. That when you meet someone, that's what you're doing. You're learning each other. You're learning, can I actually live with this person? You're learning, how do they treat their mom? How do they treat their dad? How do they treat their brother or their sister? You're learning, how do they interact with food servers and taxi drivers? And you're learning how they communicate. You're learning, how do they problem solve when they're faced with a problem or challenge? You're learning, how do they do that? And is this somebody that I can get along with? Right? What do they do when things don't go their way? You're learning those things. So rather than think about it as dating or courting, I would encourage you to think about it as you're learning this individual, because you're trying to make a wise decision of, can I actually be with this person for the rest of this life or not? And you need to learn them. That's what you're actually doing during that period of time. You're not dating and courting and falling in love and having sex. Sure, you might be doing these kinds of things, but you would really like to be learning this individual. And as you're doing that, as you're doing the learning, it's helpful to spend some time doing different activities. So normally when we're in the dating process, there's a date where I'm going to come to your house, I'm going to pick you up, we're going to go out to the movies, we're going to go to dinner, and then I'm going to bring you home, right? And now we're going to go on a date. We're going to go to the park, we're going to go walk around, we're going to have some conversation, and then I'm going to bring you home. I'm going to go on this date, right? I'm going to take you here, I'm going to take you there, and I'm going to bring you back, right? This dating tends to be, we're doing everything together. But then when you actually get closer and closer to living together, being married and things like this, what you're going to find is that you guys are just in the house together. One person's in one room, one person's in the other room, and you guys are far apart from each other physically, right? And now you're just kind of doing stuff, right? This can be very strange because you go from this dating experience where you're so involved in each other's life and going out on these dates to now you're just kind of spending time with each other. So if during the learning process, if during the dating process, you can integrate some of those kinds of things into that, that'll be really helpful for you. So maybe your date or your learning is, hey, just come on over to the house, we'll watch a movie, and then we'll kind of hang out. right? So now maybe you watch a movie together, and then maybe after the movie, you go in one room and do something, and they're in another room doing something else, where you're kind of hanging out, but you're doing different things. This is actually really helpful in terms of you guys coming together as a couple, because that's what it's going to be like when you're living together. That's what it's going to be like when you're married. So if you can do some of that in the dating process and the learning process, your minds can get used to this, where it's not like every time we're together, we have to be together 100% of the time, because that's what dating is. We tend to be with each other 100% of the time. And now when we go from dating for 6 months to maybe living together, or however long you do that for, now when we're living together, we're just kind of hanging out. And it doesn't have the same appeal as when we're together all the time. So during that learning process, during that dating process, if you guys can do just some hanging out where you're doing different things, this will be helpful for you to make that transition into living together and having a long-term sustainable relationship. Understand that change is going to occur. And as long as you're not craving permanence, you'll be comfortable with this. If you guys meet in your 20s or your 30s and you crave and you cling to that youthful appearance, and the next thing you know, you're 40, 50, 60 years old and things are changing, if you're craving that youthful appearance, you might give up on this otherwise very successful relationship and try to go find a younger person and a younger partner, because you're craving that physical appearance, that youthful appearance. So understand that beings are going to change. Their physical appearance is going to change. The way they think about things, the way they do things, all this stuff is going to change. So be comfortable with that change. All right. Any questions on any of that stuff? No questions? Okay.
I have a question.
Jake has a question. Go ahead, sir.
So it's not yet for my kids, but how do we go about helping them choose wisely friends and relationships?
You need to have discussions with them about the type of friends that they think would be wise to hang out with. So you can have discussions like, so when you're making friends, what kind of things do you look for in friendships? What are some of the qualities and some of the traits that you look for? And then even give them some scenarios. You say, if your friend lied to you, how would you handle that? If your friend stole from you, how would you handle that? You can give them these kind of scenarios, and you're not telling them what they should or shouldn't do. You're just giving them scenarios, listening to what they have to say. And then you're kind of like introducing some things back to them. So maybe you're talking to your older son, right? And you say, so what would, would you select a partner? And then he gives you certain criteria. What would you do if you ever found out that your partner was cheating on you and they were having sex with somebody else? And then he was like, well, I wouldn't mind. I wouldn't care about that. Oh, really? What if you got sexually transmitted diseases as part of that? And you had to go to the hospital and you had to take medicine. How would you feel about that? Right? So you're not like saying like, oh, you should leave them as soon as, this happens. Instead of giving them that kind of thing, you just give them scenarios, because they're going to have to think through these scenarios at some point anyway. So if you can kind of help them and kind of spur some thought, it allows them to cultivate wisdom. And then sometimes they might be saying things that you wouldn't necessarily advise. And you can say things, well, I'm not sure if that's the wisest decision or not. I would probably make decisions differently than that. And then they might say, well, what would you do, Dad? Well, if I was confronted with that situation, here's how I would handle it. And then you kind of like explain it to them. And they're like, I see why you would say that, Dad. So you're not trying to convince them. You're just kind of giving them some things to think about and kind of guiding them along this path to cultivate wisdom. And then just stepping back and giving that space for them to cultivate wisdom. Okay. I don't see any other questions anywhere. Okay, so we're going to do the same thing we did on Tuesday, which is we're just going to end here, and it's 12:15, and this way you guys can spend the whole rest of the afternoon doing whatever it is that you need to do. I do suggest that you guys do meditation if you guys aren't already doing it, because typically in this course we'd be meditating in the morning and in the afternoon, and you get at least 2 in per day, and you can kind of build this momentum going through this week to really propel you to be able to build up your meditation practice. So If you would like to, that's an option for you guys this afternoon, this evening. You guys can do some meditation for yourself. It's only going to help you to be able to do that. But tomorrow, what we're going to do is we're going to start with loving kindness meditation again, and then I'm going to teach you how to practice the path to enlightenment in the workplace, because these different topics that you're learning about, like the Eightfold Path and things like this, you might be confused about how you integrate this into the work environment. Like say you're on the phone in your office and I've taught you to practice singleness of mind, and you're on your phone in the office and somebody barges in and starts trying to demand your time. Like what would you do in that situation? So I'm going to be teaching you some things like that. Then I'm going to teach you the art of the friendly no, how to say no without saying no. This is going to help you in situations where people are like inviting you to parties, or they're inviting you to things, or they're asking you to borrow money. And the answer is no, you're not going to let them. But by saying the word no, oftentimes they get painful feelings. They attribute it to you, and then they push you away. This is aversion. So you lose relationships over this kind of thing. So I'm going to teach you about how to say no without saying no. And tomorrow, it's actually planned that we actually do finish before lunchtime. And oftentimes what we do is the students like to go out for a group lunch. So if you'd like to do that tomorrow, you're more than welcome to do that. We can organize a group lunch and go spend some time together. But after this, I'm going to teach you continued support on the path to enlightenment and how to integrate these teachings into your day-to-day life. And then that's where we'll actually finish the course tomorrow just before lunch. Okay, so thank you guys for your questions. Thank you for your interest to learn. If there's something you guys would like help with, just come let me know. I'm going to be hanging out here throughout the day. Probably I might go home. I haven't decided yet. I need to pick up my son from school at 4:30. So I'm probably going to maybe go have some lunch or hang out here, maybe just go home and wait there. But if you guys need help, I'm here. I can help you guys, whether it's during the course or anytime after the course. You're always welcome to reach out and I'll help you guys. So thank you guys for your questions, and perhaps I'll see you guys tomorrow. Okay? Sawadee Kap. Sawadee Kap.